Chapter 176 Demon Lords of the Land of Peace. And on the other side, on Pandora Island, Zhang Guo is undergoing training in psychic abilities. After so long, Zhang Guo has already cultivated his Nen to a strong level. He is grateful to Mach Vice. Mach Vice revived him, and although he lost the devil fruit, he regained access to Nen. In the process, Zhang Guo feels that his strength may not have decreased, but instead, it has become stronger. Yesterday, he injected the super soldier serum, making this feeling even clearer. He has become stronger, even stronger than his past self. This is the second day after injecting the super soldier serum, and he is currently practicing in front of Pandora's devil box. After he finishes his training, it will be time for the selected experimental subjects. During this time, the world government has been sending some mentally talented individuals, but none of them have talents that can match Zhang Guo's. Many people have gone crazy during their training, as Mach Vice said, losing control. Those who lose control will unleash their inner darkness, and many have been secretly dealt with by the Blackbeard pirates. He wonders when this training will end. With these thoughts, Zhang Guo suddenly feels like he has entered an empty realm. In the past, when he practiced Nen, he would enter the world of demons, surrounded by the whispers of demons, as if tempting him to fall. Zhang Guo resisted with his beliefs. However, this time, he didn't hear those voices again. Zhang Guo looked at this world and suddenly felt it was somewhat familiar. Emperor Shikon. He unconsciously spoke. Sure enough, when he finished speaking, a figure appeared in front of him. The person wore a thin ice mask, similar to the first time he appeared. It was Emperor Shikon. Zhang Guo was surprised. He originally thought that after losing the Great Buddha fruit, he wouldn't encounter Emperor Shikon again. After all, according to what he said, the reason he could see each other to a large extent was due to the effect of the human fruit, mythical type, model, Buddha. And now that devil fruit is in the body of Starjun, he had thought about whether to inform Starjun of Emperor Shikon's existence, but after careful consideration, he felt it was better to wait until later, as Emperor Shikon might not appear again. But now, he appeared again, not in Starjun's world but in his spiritual world. He was in the midst of Nen training, so how could he suddenly see Emperor Shikon? He suddenly remembered a sentence that Mach Vice had said to him before, that demons are best at exploiting the weaknesses of the human heart. They can change in 1,000 ways, take on the appearance of anyone, and may even inhabit the minds of anyone. Thinking of this, he looked carefully at Emperor Shikon. Is he really Emperor Shikon? Rest assured, I temporarily cut off your connection with Pandora's devil box. Emperor Shikon spoke softly at this moment. It was as if he knew what Zhang Guo was thinking, but Zhang Guo wouldn't relax his vigilance because of his words. I didn't expect us to meet again. Zhang Guo said cautiously. Your spiritual power has reached the level of awakening in the past, so, of course, we can meet again. Emperor Shikon said. Thank you for the information you provided before. I wonder why you appeared this time. Zhang Guo looked at Emperor Shikon carefully, and Emperor Shikon looked exactly the same as before, with no flaws. A new devil is about to appear. Emperor Shikon's words shocked Zhang Guo. His eyes widened, and he suddenly understood Emperor Shikon's meaning. The devil Emperor Shikon mentioned wouldn't be like the great demons such as Tofu and Killing, but rather a demon lord like Aokiji. Indeed, the great demons are strong, but the appearance of one great demon cannot change the world situation. Putting aside the issue of Killing not knowing whether he is dead or alive, both Tofu and Fyodoro are still there, and the world is still functioning as usual. But a demon lord, that's someone who can destroy the world. The last time Aokiji's apocalypse happened not long ago, and now another one is coming? It seems you've figured it out. Emperor Shikon said, last time in Jalsberg country, you did not leave behind Tofu boy. He has now found a way to resurrect his master. What method? Zhang Guo immediately asked. Regardless of whether this is the real Emperor Shikon, as long as there is this possibility, he cannot sit idly by. Because the existence of a demon lord poses a huge threat to the world. Although Aokiji was able to leave hell because he was not a complete lord, how did Tofu's master leave? Over this year, Tofu has never appeared again, and they knew that things would not end so easily, but they didn't expect another war to begin now. The method is in the Wano country. I vaguely feel that a demon lord is about to descend there. Emperor Shishishun said, I hope you can successfully prevent the arrival of the Demon Lord. After saying that, his body flickered again. Zhang Guo knew that Emperor Shishishun was about to leave. Each time they communicated, it was about this time. Wait, how much time do we have? Zhang Guo wanted to ask again. 1 year, Emperor Shishishun didn't finish his sentence, and Zhang Guo couldn't hear it anymore. This spiritual space began to collapse, and Zhang Guo returned to reality in an instant. 1 year? It's definitely not a full year, because Emperor Shishishun mentioned something later, but if we take the worst case scenario, it's a little over a year. It seems like there's still a long time, but it's actually quite fast. How long did they stay in Jalsberg country? How long did those demon worshippers prepare there? 1 year might not solve anything, especially Wano country? Zhang Guo vaguely remembered that there was indeed such a country, but it was in the deeper part of the New World, where the marine forces were relatively weak. There are many pirates. But even in the world of pirates, one cannot turn a blind eye. Aokiji's destruction a little over a year ago is still fresh in his memory. Even Red Soil continent was shattered by him, and until now, the world government doesn't know how to deal with the broken continent wall. If it weren't for Roger and the existence of the entrance to Hell, it would be impossible to defeat Aokiji. But now the entrance to Hell has disappeared in Alabasta, and it can be said that the great help in dealing with demons is gone. What if another demon lord comes? Zhang Guo stood up and left the Pandora room. He quickly ran back to the headquarters of the Blackbeard pirates and reported this matter to Mok Vice. He did not inform Mok Vice of Emperor Shishishun's presence, just saying that he received enlightenment while practicing Nen. Chapter 177 Traveling to the Land of Peace. Oh! To think that I could gain such insights through the Pandora's Devil Box. At this moment, Mok Vice has already returned from the Marine headquarters. She is sitting in her office, facing Zhang Guo. After listening to Zhang Guo's words, Mok Vice seems to be deep in thought. It's not entirely impossible. The Pandora's Devil Box can connect with the voices of demons in hell. Perhaps someone there is dealing with the demon lord about to descend in Wano country. What should we do? Should we go to Wano country now? Zhang Guo doesn't want to dwell too much on this topic, as he also can't explain the situation with Emperor Shishishun. Apart from Cap, he hasn't told anyone else about his ability to communicate with Emperor Shishishun. So, he directly asks what they should do now, and after some contemplation, Mok Vice speaks, not in a hurry for now. Last time, going to Jalsberg country early and mobilizing a large military force in advance attracted too much attention. Although mobilizing a large force can have a deterrent effect, it is also equivalent to drawing attention to ourselves. This time, we need to learn from that lesson. Zhang Guo finds it reasonable. After all, Wano country is not the same as Jalsberg country, it's in the chaotic new world. By then, even if they mobilize the same forces as in Jalsberg country, it might not have a deterrent effect. Let's not act recklessly, especially you. Until you reach a point of stagnation in your abilities, continue your training on Pandora Island, Mok Vice says. Leave this matter to Rajan for now. And I believe the world government will mobilize the Marines as well. For ordinary demons, the Blackbeard pirates can handle them entirely, but for matters like the appearance of a demon lord, it must be reported to the world government. But, Zhang Guo is a bit anxious. Can the Marines withstand all of this? Over these years, he has been living in seclusion, and he is not very familiar with the affairs of the Marines. He knows that the Marines have carried out a large-scale conscription and heard that they recruited a new admiral, but he doesn't think this generation of Marines is stronger than his own. They won't mobilize on a large scale again. Let's conduct our own secret investigations first. With over a year, we should be able to find some clues, Mok Vice says, sensing Zhang Guo's concerns. She smiles and adds, your most important task now is to improve your strength. That will be the greatest help in the upcoming war. Zhang Guo sighs. He knows it's the right thing to do, so he can only nod in acceptance. After Zhang Guo leaves, Mok Vice informs the 5 elders about the situation. Upon learning that another demon lord might appear, the 5 elders express great surprise and concern. Initially, they thought straightforwardly. Since Wano country is not a member of the world government, they can just level the country with artillery. Although the country is known for being easily defensible and hard to attack, with both the Blackbeard pirates and the Marines working together, leveling the country shouldn't be a problem. As long as they are willing to pay that price. However, compared to the appearance of a demon lord, any price is worth it. Mokvice tells them that even if the country is leveled, if they can't find Tofu Boy, there will be another Wano country. Therefore, the best approach is to investigate slowly first. If things become impossible, they can resort to artillery later. After some consideration, the 5 elders accept this proposal. They secretly send out a marine admiral, namely An. Mokvice has confirmed that An is not a demon, so the 5 elders trust her. This mission has been assigned to An because of her strength. In fact, she is even stronger than other admirals. Most importantly, she is very agile, possessing the observation haki to foresee the future. She is well suited for this task. So, when An learned about this mission, she was a bit bewildered at first. However, she quickly focused. She didn't expect another demon lord to appear so soon. She needs to report this information to the main body first. She has a special connection with Roger. Although they can't communicate in real time, with a bit of effort, they can engage in simple communication. She conveys a concise message. Demon Lord may appear in Wano country. After delivering the message, she changes into casual clothes and gets ready to head to Wano country. Wano country is a closed nation in the New World. It's not a member of the world government. A long time ago, the world government tried to invade Wano country, but they were repelled by a samurai. The high-ranking Marines are having a meeting with her before departure. It's actually just 4 people, the fleet admiral plus 3 admirals. Zifa looks at the information in his hand and says, Wano country has an unpredictable group of samurai, very powerful and extremely skilled in Busashoku haki. The supreme leader of the samurai, called general, and the regional leaders are called daimyo. But the most troublesome thing about Wano country is the way to enter. The only way to enter is through a cliff waterfall. In such a situation, it's easy to be repelled by someone. It can be said that it's an impregnable fortress, but if you can fly, it's much more convenient. Of course, An has mastered the Navy's Rokushiki, especially the Soru, which is considered easy to learn at her level. However, many people choose not to learn it for some reason. An finds it hard to understand their thinking. Are they perhaps underestimating the usefulness of a technique that allows them to linger in the air? Wearing casual clothes, An says, after entering Wano country this time, should I act together with the Blackbeard pirates? No, conduct separate explorations. However, you can communicate and exchange information appropriately through Den Den Mushi, the admiral replies. The empty words make An somewhat disappointed. But it doesn't matter, even though they say this at the Marine headquarters, what she does in Wano country is entirely up to her, right? But it definitely cannot affect the mission. Even if she is investigating Mokvice, she cannot interfere with the task of preventing the Demon Lord from descending. Alright, I'll take these things with me and read them slowly on the way. An puts away the files containing information about Wano country. There are not many documents because Wano country is a closed nation, always shrouded in mystery. If you find anything, don't try to be brave. Notify the headquarters directly, and we will send reinforcements, the admiral says. Chapter 178 Himura Kenshin and Mitsuki Goten. The outside world is in motion, while inside Wano country. Flower capital. This is the most prosperous area in Wano country and the residence of the ruler, the general. In this magnificent capital, there is a hint of darkness despite the general's rule, who holds absolute power over all of Wano country. Just like any seemingly bright nation, there is a small group of underworld figures, and the leader among them is Hyagoro. Yes, it's the later flower Hyagoro, who trained Luffy in the Rokushiki techniques. However, he is not the thin old man from later times, he is currently in his prime. He appears somewhat overweight with little muscle definition, but that's mainly because he hasn't exercised much after establishing his reputation. He wears a simple coat over his upper body, exposing a large belly. There are blue tattoos on his shoulders and chest area. Taking a puff of his cigarette, he happily speaks to the person in front of him. Hi, it's been a while, Hyamuro. Didn't expect to see you again. The man in front of him has a much better physique, not exactly muscular, even considered slim in this world. However, he possesses a unique charisma. His gaze is exceptionally determined, dressed in a kimono with a red top and white bottom. He has a mane of brown-red long hair, currently sitting in front of Hyagoro, holding a cup of sake. Yes, he is Himura Kenshin. A long time ago, Kenshin was brought to Wano country by Minamoto no Yoritomo. Wano country is the most suitable place for Kenshin, and this is where Kenshin's later identity originated. He takes a sip of the sake in his cup, then expresses a slight sigh, saying, "Years have passed since we last met, and Hyagoro, you seem to be getting younger." "Ha ha ha, talking about getting younger? It's you, Kenshin, who seems to be growing younger," Hyagoro says with some joy. "By the way, where's your master? Why didn't he come down the mountain with you this time?" To have a reasonable and convenient identity, Yoritomo modified some of Hyagoro's memories, and Yoritomo's current strength is no less than that of Mach Vice, fully capable of achieving this. His temperament is better suited to staying in the mountains, Kenshin says softly. "Handling things like drinking is always left to me. He still doesn't want to come down the mountain, such a pity. Strong individuals like you and your master, if you joined the Kojiki family, could have become the world's #1 samurai," Hyagoro regrets. In his memory, Himura Kenshin and his master Hiko Seijuro were powerful warriors, but Hiko believed that warriors like them, once they came down from the mountain, would be manipulated by others. Thus, despite having powerful martial arts, they lived a hermit-like life. It was when Kenshin went out before that he happened to see Kenshin, who was out for a drink, 2 years ago. So, he brought Kenshin to his home. Kenshin shakes his head. "In times of prosperity, who needs samurai?" As he just finishes his words, a rough voice suddenly comes from outside. "Hyagoro boss, who did you say wants to become the world's #1 samurai?" Hearing this voice, Hyagoro frowns and sighs, troublesome person is coming. Kenshin doesn't need him to say it, he already knows who is coming. He looks towards the door, which is immediately pushed open. The newcomer is tall, with phoenix eyes and thick eyebrows. He has black hair tied up into a massive disc on his head, even larger than his own head. He carries 2 swords on his waist and walks in a carefree manner. Oden Kojiki. Having been in Wano country for a few years, Kenshin sees Oden Kojiki in person for the first time. This man, with the ability of curses and memes, possesses the world's most potent notebook. Yes, he is a man who can enchant others. No need to ask, who is this? But on the surface, Kenshin still asks Hyagoro, who is this? Oden Kojiki. Before Hyagoro answers, Oden has walked over, casually filling himself a cup of sake. "Hyagoro, it's been a long time. Who would have thought I'd see you again?" "Boss, who is this?" But Kenshin doesn't wait for Hyagoro to answer, Oden has already approached and asked Kenshin, "Hey, who are you?" "I've never heard Boss Hyagoro say that someone could become the world's #1 samurai." "Himura Kenshin." Kenshin honestly replies, but then shakes his head, "I dare not claim to be the world's #1 samurai. Boss Hyagoro is exaggerating." "Hyagoro boss, should I pay attention to someone who can't drink and can't become the strongest samurai?" Oden looks at Kenshin with some dissatisfaction, but Hyagoro directly pushes him out, saying, "Kenshin has something to do later. Don't cause trouble here." "Eh? What do you mean by causing trouble?" "I'm serious." Oden looks somewhat disappointed. Kenshin, looking at their shoving, also slowly stands up. He picks up a gourd from the table, politely saying to Hyagoro, "Boss Hyagoro, I'll leave first. Until we meet again." Hyagoro, upon hearing this, expresses some regret, "I hope the next time we meet, your master can change his mind." Kenshin nods, "I will convey Boss Hyagoro's words to my master." After saying that, he leaves. In a short while, only Hyagoro and Oden are left in the room. "Boss, who was that guy, and his master?" "You seem to care a lot." Oden, still the same as before, walks to the table and starts eating. Hyagoro sighs, "They are both formidable swordsmen, especially his master. I can feel that he is unfathomable. Really powerful." Oden is a bit skeptical. He knows that Hyagoro is indeed powerful, otherwise, how could he become the boss of the underworld? But such Hyagoro actually said that others are unfathomable? "Of course," Hyagoro says confidently, "don't give me that expression. I can be sure that his master is much more powerful than you." "Really?" Oden's face shows some excitement, but Hyagoro gives him a stern look. "I advise you not to have any ideas about them." Hiko is a powerful swordsman, but he is also a recluse, living without a fixed address. When I go with him, isn't that okay? Hyogoro is well aware of Odin's personality, so he says directly, you are absolutely impossible to keep up with Kenshin. As the words fall, Odin has already disappeared. Hyogoro sighs in Flower Capital. Chapter 179 Killing Mitsuki Odin. Hikari Tsukamadu has always been a person who does things his own way and doesn't follow the rules. If others don't want him to do something, he wants to do it even more. Hisabura said he couldn't keep up with Kenshin, but now he really wants to try. So, where is he now? Outside, on the bustling streets, people are coming and going. Kenshin's figure is not much different from an ordinary person's. How will he find him? Suddenly, Tsukamadu leaps up. This jump takes him 7 or 8 meters high, directly onto the tallest nearby building. People panic when they see him suddenly leap, but once they recognize that it's the eccentric Kurikaradame, they become accustomed to it. Tsukamadu is always like this. The absurd things he's seen before are much more outrageous than this. If he can cremate corpses to eat Odin, what's wrong with suddenly jumping several meters onto a roof? And Tsukamadu doesn't care about others' opinions. After reaching a high point, he looks around and finally sees Kenshin in the direction of the city gate. Hey, didn't I just find him? Tsukamadu quickly rushes towards the city gate, but by the time he arrives, Kenshin has already left the city. However, Tsukamadu knows the direction he left, so he continues to pursue. He came by rooftop, so he saw Kenshin heading north after leaving the city gate. Therefore, after leaving the city gate, Tsukamadu also heads north. The capital of the flower country is naturally prosperous, but outside the prosperous city, there are desolate areas. Tsukamadu follows Kenshin to a rural path, leading to a dilapidated village ahead, which seems to have been uninhabited for some time. After Kenshin leaves, Tsukamadu swaggeringly walks in. He finds that the village has been abandoned for several years at least. There are no elderly people inside. He wonders if they all moved away or... Tsukamadu doesn't think too much. Right now, he just wants to see what the person called the world's #1 swordsman by Hisabura is like. As for Kenshin, he doesn't care about him. After all, he still has a master. A disciple at his age is definitely not as powerful as a master. Thinking of this, he can't help but pick up his pace. But just as he passed through this small village, he suddenly stopped. Because at that moment, Tsukamadu felt a suffocating aura rushing towards him. It's like the sky suddenly darkened, the whole world plunged into darkness, and Tsukamadu felt breathless in that instant. In the next moment, a beam of light flashed from the darkness, attracting Tsukamadu's attention. But soon, he felt a chilling fear, and his whole body bristled with sweat. Fast, it's as fast as lightning. But this is not lightning, it's a sword light slashing towards his throat. Tsukamadu Nidoryo, Tujan Hakura. At the critical moment, Tsukamadu quickly drew his sword. The intertwined twin swords released a powerful armament haki as he slashed forward. This strike could split a giant mountain in an instant, but at this moment, it couldn't cut through the sword light because that light was from a sharper sword than his. Tsukamadu's figure was blasted backward with a loud bang. His feet plowed 2 long marks on the ground, with blood flowing amidst those marks. Enduring the pain, Tsukamadu looked at the person in front of him. At this moment, there was a long bloodstain on his chest. Although he reacted a bit slowly just now, he should have defended himself, yet he still suffered such an injury. What amazing swordsmanship! He wasn't angry about being injured. Instead, he admired Kenshin, who stood in front of him. Yes, the person in front of him was Kenshin, who had appeared at Hisabura's house before. Kenshin still had the same appearance, with a gourd around his waist and a long sword in his hand. The long sword flickered with cold light, stained with blood, including Tsukamadu's blood. At this moment, Kenshin was completely different from his previous gentle demeanor at Hisabura's house. He emitted a heavy killing intent with his cold gaze, matching the blood on his blade. He seemed like a murderous demon. Just now's attack was out of respect for Hisabura. If you follow me again, I'll take your life, Kenshin said coldly. However, Tsukamadu didn't care at all. He grinned and raised his twin swords. Too bad, my decision hasn't changed yet. I must follow you. Kenshin thought to himself, this guy is spoiled by his family. Tsukamadu is like a child, used to doing whatever he wants. However, because he is from the Tsukamadu clan and will be the future general of the Yuki country, no one dares to do anything to him. That's why he has developed this unruly character. Now is the perfect time to teach this spoiled kid a lesson. Dragon's Nest Flash. As soon as Tsukamadu heard Kenshin's words, Kenshin moved. His speed was even faster than the previous attack. Tsukamadu Nidoryo, Sugen no Oni. Tsukamadu also moved forward. How could such a demon king like him retreat because of Kenshin's words? Moreover, he didn't think he was weaker than Kenshin. So, facing Kenshin's attack, he slashed with both swords. The collision of the two blades formed a powerful armament haki, which could instantly split a huge mountain in half. However, at this moment, it couldn't cut through the sword light because that light was from a sharper sword than his. Kenshin twisted his body, and in the instant of collision with Tsukamadu, he had already turned his sword, using the rotation of his body to evade the confrontation. In the collision of haki, he had already taken advantage of the rotation of his body to twist the blade to Tsukamadu's shoulder. Tsukamadu also realized that something was wrong. He wanted to pursue quickly, but Kenshin cleverly evaded. He had no choice but to retreat. Kenshin dodged his successive attacks, but he couldn't dodge Kenshin's slash. After separating, he also suffered a deep wound on his shoulder. After 2 rounds of fighting, he was injured twice, once in the chest and once in the shoulder. Tsukamadu had never encountered such a powerful opponent in so many years. So strong. Enduring the pain, Tsukamadu wielded his blades in a flurry, engaging in a fierce battle with Kenshin, who was closely pursuing him. Does he really have a master? If his disciple is so powerful, how strong must his master be? Dragon Soaring Flash. In the midst of the flurry, Kenshin suddenly shouted, and Tsukamadu's expression froze because he saw that Kenshin's sword was aimed at his throat. Tsukamadu Nidoryo, Jishin Daiken. Gritting his teeth, Tsukamadu released a powerful haki attached to his sword in an instant and clashed with Kenshin's sword. Kenshin's slash was aimed at his throat, truly intending to take his life. Boom! The final result came out. Tsukamadu was swiftly pushed back by Kenshin, and he spat out blood again. Tsukamadu Nidoryo, Tujan Juken. However, as he retreated, he also released his strongest blow. The cross-shaped armament haki rushed forward and collided with Kenshin, who was about to pursue him. Chapter 180 Resurrected Kojiki Odin. Great opportunity! Tsukamadu's eyes lit up. He forcefully planted his feet on the ground and then abruptly surged forward, leveraging the reaction force. Because at this moment, Kenshin was hit by his Tujan Juken, he would definitely be unable to counter Tsukamadu's next full-force slash. However, Kenshin seemed to completely see through his actions or had been waiting for Tsukamadu's attack all along. He coldly watched Tsukamadu and suddenly twisted his body. Something shot out of his body. He actually shot out the scabbard. Tsukamadu was shocked. He didn't expect Kenshin to use the scabbard as a weapon. But now he had no time to react. The twin swords, poised to strike, were hit by the scabbard. The originally slashing blades aimed at Kenshin were deflected, and it was this deflection that gave Kenshin an opportunity. In an instant, his body moved like a phantom, breaking through the armament haki cross formed by Tujan Juken, and swiftly slashed towards Tsukamadu. Ah! Tsukamadu shouted inwardly that things were not good, but it was too late. He no longer had a chance to react. At the moment of life and death, Tsukamadu also forced out a bit of bloodthirstiness. His twin swords, deflected by the scabbard, still slashed towards Kenshin. Even if he was to die, he wanted to leave something behind for Kenshin. And at that moment, the two figures intertwined. Kenshin gripped his sword with both hands, still maintaining the posture of swinging forward. Tsukamadu was the same, clenching his twin swords tightly. After who knew how long, Tsukamadu finally spoke. Truly, worthy of being recognized by Hisabura as the world's #1 swordsman. But, leaving the #1 swordsman with a scar, I'm also quite amazing, right? Spurt! A huge blood blade suddenly appeared from his abdomen to his chest, tearing through his body. The immense armament haki ripped through his body, and blood sprayed out like a fountain. He fell to the ground in an instant. The ground was covered in blood. Kenshin gently sheathed his blade and picked up the fallen scabbard nearby. He turned around and simultaneously sheathed his sword. In the next life, don't force yourself to do things you can't do. Spurt. A blood blade suddenly appeared on his left cheek. This was the result of Tsukumado's last desperate slash, leaving a cut on Kenshin's face, but at the cost of his own life. Kenshin stepped over his body, silently continuing forward, as if he completely ignored Tsukumado's corpse, and didn't care who Tsukumado was. He was the descendant of the Tsukumado clan, the future general of the Yuki country. His death would definitely cause a huge shock to the country. But no matter what happened, it had nothing to do with Kenshin because he was only responsible for killing. So, his figure gradually disappeared here, disappearing into the distant shadows. Tsukumado's body lay on the ground, ravaged by the sword aura, and no one knew how long had passed. Until the end, 3 people walked out of the village and came to Tsukumado's body. See that? One of them was pitch black, as if emitting a very high temperature. He was none other than the long-lost Sengoku. On his left was a man with 2 horns on his head, a sturdy figure, and a wolf-tooth club in his hand. He was Kaido. At this moment, Kaido was not the peak period 100 Beast Kaido yet. Although he had already gathered his subordinates, his power was not yet great. However, power did not affect strength. He wasn't famous now because he was weak. In fact, he was very strong even before joining the Rocks Pirates. At that time, people even thought that the Rocks Pirates became invincible after getting Kaido. When the Rocks Pirates were defeated by Roger, Kaido was still growing. Now, he had become several times stronger. At this moment, he also came to the Wano country. On Sengoku's right was a woman, a very old woman, with messy long hair and a sharp nose. There was a shadow on her face that showed she was not a good person. It was Sengoku who said the previous sentence to the man and woman. He looked towards the direction Kenshin had left and slowly said, "No, I can see his dark soul. He's a born executioner. His master is restraining him, but we can set him free. Is it necessary?" Kaido frowned. "With the strength of the 2 of us, we can sweep the entire Wano country. The Wano country is far from simple. To occupy this country, he needs to create chaos himself." Sengoku glanced at the woman and said, "Right, Kurosumo." Yes, this woman was the descendant of the Kurosumo clan, a famous clan in Wano. The Kurosumo clan was annihilated because of their attempt to seize the position of the general, leaving only a few survivors. They had been waiting for the opportunity for revenge in secret. And now, this opportunity had come. Sengoku found them and promised to hand over the entire Wano country to the Kurosumo clan as long as they followed his plan. Of course, the era of the Tsukumado ruling this clan is about to end. Starting from this fool, Tsukumado. Kurosumo smiled in satisfaction. Now that Tsukumado is dead, I can take on his appearance and usurp his position. She was a user of the Paramecia type Mocha Mocha no Mi devil fruit, which allowed her to take on the appearance of anyone. But Sengoku stopped her. He chuckled softly. "It's not necessary at all, just..." A fleshy object, still emitting a faint light, appeared in his hand. Slowly bending down, he placed this flesh on Tsukumado's body. "What are you doing?" Kaido frowned. "Just watch." Sengoku stood up again and led the 3 away from the scene. Not long after they left the area, Tsukumado, who had fallen down, suddenly opened his eyes. He didn't die? No, of course he died. With Kenshin's slash just now plus his previous injuries, even a deity couldn't save Tsukumado. But now Tsukumado had actually opened his eyes again? This is strange. Tsukumado felt a slight headache. He rubbed his forehead and then quickly reached for his previous wounds. "I'm not dead." Tsukumado widened his eyes. Kenshin's slash just now was too fierce, and he had already prepared himself for death. But now, he wasn't dead? Could it be that Kenshin held back? Chapter 181 Hashun and Kojiki Oden. Tsukumado still remembered what had happened before. In his memory, he had engaged in a final sword duel with Kenshin. They brushed past each other, leaving a scar on Kenshin, while Kenshin dealt him a fatal blow. According to the precision and strength of that sword at the time, he should indeed have died. But now, he had awakened? Could it be that he had misjudged, and Kenshin hadn't killed him? Tsukumado looked at the world around him, feeling doubtful for a moment. But, being alive is good enough. Tsukumado touched his chest, and suddenly the pain of his torn flesh came rushing in. The intense pain made him grimace. He didn't know which direction Kenshin had gone, so he could only sigh lightly. Better to go home first. Since he had lost track of Kenshin, he would heal his wounds and then find an opportunity to have another match with Kenshin. Enduring the pain, he walked in the direction he had come from, and soon disappeared from the village again. What Tsukumato himself couldn't see was that at the moment he opened his eyes were purely pitch black. As if they condensed all the malice in the world, just seeing those eyes would send shivers down one's spine. However, the darkness disappeared after a short while, but the three people in hiding could see it clearly. What did you do to him? Kaido and the others emerged again, recalling the pitch-black childlike eyes. Kaido couldn't help but ask Sengoku. We need to legally control this country, so naturally, we must comply with the will of the country itself. Sengoku's lips curled slightly, and he said joyfully, I've infused Tsukumato's body with devil cells. He will be unconsciously controlled by the power of the devil. He will pose a huge threat to this country. By then, the Kurosumo family will be the last hope of this country, and Kaido, you will be the savior of this country. Then, you can easily take control of this country. Sengoku said softly. Most importantly, this won't arouse suspicion from other forces and will allow us to continue our work in secret. Kaido looked at Sengoku, recalling their agreement. Their cooperation began after the Battle of Ed War, when Sengoku approached Kaido and told him a big piece of news: the legendary ancient weapon Pluton was in the Wano country. Sengoku asked if Kaido wanted to join forces, and Kaido agreed, which was why the three of them were together now. Because they shared a common goal, at least the first step was the same, to overthrow the Tsukumato family and let the Kurosumo family become the general of Wano. Kaido would search for the ancient weapon, while Sengoku would also search for something. Of course, this small alliance was led by Sengoku. After all, he was the strongest. With his strength and the legacy of Kaido and the Kurosumo family, they could easily overthrow the Tsukumato family. However, Sengoku hadn't made a move. This was also Kaido's confusion, until today when he saw what was happening before him. The battle between Tsukumato and Kenshin, both of them were very strong. At least Kaido believed that neither of them was beneath him. Kenshin even had a master who hadn't shown himself yet. At first, Sengoku said that the Wano country wasn't simple, and there were many powerful forces behind the scenes. Kaido didn't believe it, but now he did. Let the internal forces of the Wano country consume each other. Isn't that great? There was a hint of playfulness in Sengoku's tone. When Tsukumato transforms into the Great Demon King, the people of Wano will be unable to bear it and decide to rebel. Then, the Kurosumo family can step forward to lead them. By then, Kenshin and his master may also join you. Let them fight each other internally first. When the power is almost exhausted and the hidden masters are all out, then it's time for us to take action. Such a malicious plan. Kaido glanced at Sengoku, only to say that he was truly a devil. But he was the same. Kaido didn't care about the consequences of doing this, nor did he think there was anything wrong with what Sengoku was doing. On the contrary, it was good, very good. Kurosumo didn't say anything because she knew that she was just a pawn pushed out by them to gain control. Just by using the name of the Kurosumo family to legally control the Wano country, she didn't care. She thought it was good. This country deserved to be destroyed. From the moment Tsukumato Shokuba was born as the general of the Wano country, from the moment the Kurosumo family couldn't become the general, it was already destined to be like this today. Even after the Kurosumo family was destroyed, they were still persecuted, living a life of wandering and adversity. They should have lived in luxury. All of this was because of the detestable Wano country. So what do we do next? Kurosumo asked. Kaido also looked at Sengoku. Sengoku was about to say something but suddenly smiled. Help me find something. Kaido concentrated. He knew that Sengoku had cooperated with them to find something, but that thing wasn't an ancient weapon, so what could it be? It had to be something that made Sengoku, a person of his caliber, rack his brains to find. It definitely wasn't something simple. A graveyard. A graveyard. Kaido was puzzled. A shrine maiden's grave. For now, you all can just wander around. If you find any clues about the shrine maiden's grave, feel free to contact me. I'll reward you with something besides what you should get. After speaking, Sengoku added, I have a feeling that maybe others have also set their sights on the Wano country. Be careful not to be discovered when the time comes. I really don't understand your cautious behavior, Kaido snorted and left, holding the wolf tooth club. But in his heart, he had already noted Sengoku's words. A shrine maiden's grave? What was he looking for a shrine maiden's grave for? Unlike the world government and the Roger pirates, Kaido only knew about the existence of devils but didn't have specific information about them, so he couldn't understand the significance of what Sengoku was doing. But as long as he got stronger, Kaido was obsessed with becoming stronger. He needed to become stronger. Chapter 182 The Thoughts of Yuan Yi and Roger. The remnants of poneglyphs contain the power of poneglyphs, which can replace people with the dark power of poneglyphs, eventually driving them mad and turning them into destructive weapons. The poneglyph seed, on the other hand, is able to provide the implanted individual with a nurturing soil, giving birth to a poneglyph that can control its own power and retain its sanity. The significance of these two is completely different. Firstly, the presence or absence of sanity is already the biggest difference. The power that can be exerted with sanity is much stronger than the power exerted without it. Secondly, poneglyph remnants only grant some of poneglyph's power to individuals, while the poneglyph seed can regenerate poneglyph from within the body. Genichi is currently experimenting, and such experiments inevitably require subjects. Tsukumaru is a good choice. He implanted poneglyph remnants fused with Shikon Jewel fragments into his body, which is why he was able to revive after being killed by Kenshin. He needs to observe carefully to see what Tsukumaru will ultimately become. Will it be a sane poneglyph regeneration? Or an insane demon king? He believes that if he doesn't use the poneglyph remnants properly, he will only create someone relatively strong. However, if he can manufacture them into poneglyph seeds, he might be able to achieve a level close to that of a character in the tens of millions of character cards. This time is his attempt. If he fails, he won't mind too much because even if it's just poneglyph remnants, they should still give Tsukumaru immense power, and he can still continue the drama. Anyway, there's still plenty of time. He's not a scientist, so it's normal for him not to immediately turn poneglyph remnants into poneglyph seeds. And if he succeeds, it's like gaining another Atrox-level combat power. So this experiment is necessary. He reviewed the current members of various forces in the Wano country. Wano itself, Marine Headquarters, Black Sect, Kaido. And Roger has already received information from and about the Wano country, and it is very likely that he will also go to this country. The forces are a bit unbalanced. He frowned. If that's the case, then Tsukumadu's side won't be able to resist the rebels. In his plan, Tsukumaru will be influenced by poneglyph's power and fall into darkness, which won't be too suspicious if he does it himself because in the minds of the Wano people, he is already a demon king, and they won't notice Tsukumadu's changes. So the power around Tsukumaru is currently the orthodox military power of Wano, the daimyos of various regions, his own retainers, and the retainers of the generals, combined with Tsukumadu's own power slowly enhanced by poneglyph remnants. Such power can definitely crush the entire Wano country, even with Kenshin's help. But once other forces join in, it will be different. And Roger's pirate crew will definitely stand with the people, and by then, this war may become one-sided. This won't work because he needs time to fuse the poneglyph remnants with Tsukumaru, and he needs to observe Tsukumadu's performance. If he fails too quickly, how can he observe? It seems that he still needs to provide some assistance to the Tsukumaru family. Genichi thought about suitable candidates. Maybe. Suddenly, he had an idea. What if the Red Alert base vehicle is deployed in the Wano country? During this time, he had been looking for a suitable location for his base, but he hadn't found one because the place he was looking for needed to have many people and abundant resources, and such places were already proper countries. But the Wano country is very good. Anyway, it is going to erupt into war in his plan, and by then, there won't be a need for generals and daimyos. He could just occupy this place and use it as his base. Sengoku happens to be in the Wano country now, so he'll let him find a suitable place first. While Genichi was carrying out his plan, Roger was also thinking. He had received Anne's information and knew that a demon lord might appear in the Wano country. Speaking of which, Roger thought about the information of the Wano country in his mind, suddenly saying to Rayleigh, I remember the samurai in the Wano country can interpret ancient texts, right? Roger had gone to the Water 7 island a long time ago. That was the final island on the surface. But Roger keenly discovered that there was another place after Water 7, and that was the end of the Grand Line. And the way to get to that island is to collect the historical texts and interpret the final location from them. But Roger couldn't interpret ancient texts, nor did anyone on his ship. Is this just a rumor? Rayleigh looked surprised that Roger suddenly asked him this question and didn't understand why Roger would suddenly ask this question. I'm wondering if demons have anything to do with that island. Roger certainly couldn't tell Rayleigh that he received a message from a Marine Admiral saying that a demon lord has descended on the Wano country. He thought Rayleigh and the others would think he was crazy. If it wasn't for Roger's personal experience of splitting, watching and split from his body, he wouldn't believe that he had a clone of a Marine Admiral. But that's the fact. So Roger decided to use ancient texts as a decoy to go to the Wano country. Why would you think that? Rayleigh was surprised, thought for a moment, and said, if anything, there might be information related to the blank century in there, but demon history is thousands or tens of thousands of years ago. I just suddenly had this idea. Roger didn't know how to explain it, so he could only say forcefully, demons have disappeared, but their followers haven't disappeared, and there are treasures left behind, such as the Shikon Jewel. So the final island might not be unrelated to demons. That's why I think we need to speed up. We're already looking for that treasure ourselves. Rayleigh still didn't understand, but he also agreed with Roger's idea. They do need to speed up. After leaving Water 7 Island, they have been trying to find the final island in every possible way. And now demons are changing the world, and even they might die in the coming of demons. At least, reach that place before that day arrives. He knew that was Roger's long-cherished wish, so Rayleigh wouldn't object. Are you suggesting that we go to the Wano country? Yes. Roger said loudly. Go to the Wano country, then interpret the ancient texts to reach the final destination. Apart from dealing with the possible descent of the demon lord, this is indeed Roger's goal. Find the historical texts, unravel his doubts, what does the D really mean, what is the blank century, and does it have any connection with demons? Chapter 183 The Blackened Kojiki Odin. Roger and his crew also set off for the Wano country, and because the entire ship was mobilized without relying on nameless instant teleportation, they still needed a long time to sail. Roger thought for a moment and felt that they would arrive a few days later than an. However, it would still take more than a year for the demon lord to appear, so there was no need to rush. Now, let's turn our attention back to the Wano country. Tsukamadu returned to the house of Hyagoro. As he returned home, he became more and more angry. How dare that Kenshin Himura treat him like that? He was just a commoner, while he was the son of a Wano general. How could Kenshin want to kill him? Moreover, he hadn't done anything wrong. Since it was on the land of Wano, couldn't he, as the son of a general, go and see? What rule of Wano forbids walking with someone else? The pain and tearing sensation in his body made his anger accumulate more and more. The blood on his chest was still stimulating his nerves. He clenched his fists tightly and quickly ran towards Hyagoro's house. His blood-covered appearance caused many people to exclaim along the way. These exclamations only added to Tsukamadu's madness. What were these people freaking out about? They were a bunch of useless people. Amidst a series of exclamations and panic, Tsukamadu kicked open the door of Hyagoro's house and suppressed the anger in his heart as he went in. At this moment, Hyagoro was sitting in the courtyard enjoying the sun. When he saw Tsukamadu suddenly barging in, covered in blood, he was astonished and quickly stood up and ran over. Tsukamadu, what's wrong? Seeing Hyagoro's concerned expression, Tsukamadu's anger eased a bit, but he was still puzzled. What's wrong with me? Was it so easy to be controlled by anger just now? But when he thought of Kenshin Himura, he couldn't help but feel angry again. It wasn't just because Kenshin Himura killed him, but also because Kenshin's talent was evidently superior to his. Tsukamadu always thought he was invincible, but Kenshin Himura was obviously younger than him and yet possessed sword skills far superior to his own. And he even killed him with his own hands. Flames of jealousy burned in his heart, not just anger. How could this happen? Hyagoro boss. Tell me everything about Kenshin Himura and his master. As soon as Hyagoro heard this, he knew that Tsukamadu had suffered a big loss with them. He hesitated a bit, but when he saw Tsukamadu covered in blood and the deep and bone-seen knife marks ahead, he couldn't help but say, "Tsukamadu, you should go and heal first." "No!" Tsukamadu suddenly roared. This roar tore open the wound again, causing blood to gush out, but he seemed oblivious, pressing his hands firmly on Hyagoro's shoulders and shouting loudly, "I must know their information." His eyes were bloodshot, with a hint of darkness in the redness, making Hyagoro sweat on his forehead. Being stared at by those blood-red eyes, Tsukamadu seemed like a fierce beast about to devour someone. Hyagoro instinctively wanted to step back, but Tsukamadu's hands were like iron clamps, firmly holding him in front of him. He even felt Tsukamadu's hands tightening, causing his shoulders to ache. "Are you crazy? Tsukamadu!" Hyagoro pushed Tsukamadu away. As a boss in the underworld, Hyagoro was never short of courage and ferocity. He also angrily said, "Do you know what you're doing?" This push made Tsukamadu seem to wake up suddenly. He stepped back 2 steps abruptly, the red light in his eyes disappeared, and he suddenly calmed down. He looked strangely at his own hands, while Hyagoro continued, "Go and treat your injuries. If you really want to know something, wait until you're healed, and I'll tell you then." Tsukamadu heard Hyagoro's words in his ears, but he was in a strange state at the moment. What did I just do? Tsukamadu was a scoundrel. He forcibly took women, caused great floods, and ate Odin with the bodies of the dead, but he had never treated people around him like this. With murderous intent. Yes, there was indeed a bit of dissatisfaction with Hyagoro in his heart just now, and that little dissatisfaction quickly turned into ugly murderous intent. He had actually thought about killing Hyagoro. This shouldn't be like this. He stood still for a moment, then quickly shook his head to clear his mind. But soon, another voice appeared in his mind. He must find Kenshin Himura, no matter the cost. He was killed by Kenshin Himura once, so he must kill him back. This was his purpose in coming back from hell, to bring Kenshin Himura into the realm of death. He felt a severe headache, very severe. He couldn't help but cover his head with both hands. The pain in his head was even more intense than the wound on his body, causing him to kneel down on the ground suddenly and pass out directly. Tsukamadu. Watching Tsukamadu suddenly collapse after being stunned, Hyagoro was also surprised. He quickly ran over and called for help. "Someone! Quickly take Tsukamadu to the hospital, and then report the matter to the general here." Hyagoro was a big figure in the underworld, but his identity had long been recognized by the authorities. Otherwise, Tsukamadu would not have come here repeatedly. Following his orders, someone quickly took Tsukamadu away, and at the same time, someone went to report to the general's mansion. He stood alone in place, looking at the familiar land, feeling puzzled for a moment. What happened? Tsukamadu went to find Kenshin Himura before. He thought Kenshin Himura should have shaken off Tsukamadu, and even if he couldn't shake off Tsukamadu, there shouldn't have been a problem with Kenshin's strength. But he never expected that it would be Tsukamadu who ran into trouble. Could it be that Kenshin has grown so strong in these years? He couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Bige, I really admire your disciple's level, but you've also brought a disaster upon yourself." "Who is Tsukamadu?" "He is the heir of the general in Wano. There is only one son in the family of the Hyagoro family. Now, besides such things, how can the official Wano tolerate it?" Despite the fact that the Hyagoro family had severed relations with him before, that was purely to deceive people. There was only one son in the Hyagoro family, and who would be the next general if they severed relations with him? Previously, the problem of the Hyagoro family, which had no descendants, almost caused a great chaos. The Kurosumai family believed that the Hyagoro family, which had no heirs, would definitely choose other daimyos to be the general. That was the cause of the turmoil. Fortunately, the current general of the Wano country, Hyagoro Kojiki, was born, and the conspiracy of the Kurosumai family was revealed. Tsukamadu, in the Wano country, is very important. Chapter 184 Hyagoro's departure and An's arrival. So when Tsukamadu made a little fuss in Kurimaki, Tokikatsu Kurimaki quickly restored his relationship with Tsukamadu and directly appointed him as a daimyo. And now, Tsukamadu was almost killed, and it was evident that Tsukamadu himself was filled with resentment. How could the official authorities of Wano country tolerate this? As for the attitudes of other daimyos, they should be similar to the Kurimaki families, because they were also deeply influenced by the rebellion of the Kurosumai family decades ago. At that time, many members of their families died in the assassinations of the Kurosumai family. So they hoped to see the Kurimaki family's succession stabilized, and they themselves had high loyalty to the Kurimaki family. They would not disobey the Kurimaki family's orders. In other words, Kenshin Himura and his group might face the hostility of the entire Wano country. Even if they could hide, could they escape the investigation of the entire Wano country? Even if they could fight, could they overcome the warriors of the entire Wano country? Kenshin, how could you do such a thing? Hyogoro sighed deeply, and at this moment, another voice came to him. A woman's voice. What's wrong? I saw something happen to Tsukumaru. Hyogoro turned his head and saw that it was his wife. Hyogoro's mood was heavy. He looked up at the sky, with a vague sense of foreboding in his heart, and said, I think, we're in trouble. Trouble? Hyogoro didn't say anything more, but the ominous feeling in his heart grew stronger. No matter what the situation was now, no matter how much of a hero he was, he couldn't change the fact that he was a member of the underworld. Being in the underworld also meant that he had done many things that were not openly recognized by Wano, which meant that he had leverage in the hands of the authorities. If they were to force him to deal with Kenshin and his group, what should he do? Although he didn't think things would develop to that point, after all, he still knew Tsukumaru quite well. His current abnormality should only be because he couldn't accept being seriously injured for the first time. Once he calmed down, things would get better. But he still felt something was wrong. Especially when he thought of Tsukumadu's blood-red eyes, which seemed like the eyes of a demon, with darkness swirling within the redness. We're leaving Hanako Toba. Suddenly, Hyogoro said to his wife. What? His wife was shocked. Why do we suddenly have to leave Hanako Toba when everything is fine? Don't ask, just listen to me. Hyogoro's intuition warned him that he should leave now, and he also wanted to go find Kenshin and Baiji to ask them what had happened, and why Tsukumaru was so resentful. Tsukumaru was usually easygoing, even if he was seriously injured, he shouldn't be so angry. It must be. Something happened. Thinking like this, he quickly went back to the house to pack up, then came out again with some necessary money for the road. His wife didn't understand what had happened, but since Hyogoro said so, she could only follow. She quickly packed up a few belongings, and within a few minutes, the two of them had packed up a bundle. Soon, Hyogoro, the famous hero of Hanako Toba and even the entire Wano country, left his mansion. At this moment, An, who had already arrived in Wano, frowned as she watched the two people who quickly passed by her. A man and a woman, also carrying some bundles, looked like they were fleeing. An turned her head and memorized their backs. Since she came to investigate, naturally, she couldn't miss any clues. Since the behavior of the man and the woman was abnormal, it could be a clue, so it was better to remember it first. After coming to Wano, her first target was Hanako Toba, the capital of Wano. This was the center of Wano and naturally the center of information. Here, she could learn a lot of things. Walking on the bustling streets, she paid attention to the surrounding buildings and then walked into a huge house. The places where the most information could be gathered were taverns and gambling dens, because it was not the time to eat and drink now, so An chose the gambling den. There were all kinds of people inside, from high-ranking officials to ruffians, and everything in between. There was no better place than here to quickly understand a city. There were still many people inside, sitting together in groups, playing their own games on the tables. She noticed that there were guards in many places, and the scale was large. This was a gambling den that met her requirements. However, just as she entered, a man with a flushed face and a strong smell of alcohol staggered over. He said somewhat unclearly, "Hey, why would a little girl from a good family like you come to a place like this? And dressed like this, you're a whore." An frowned, looking at the people around her, she found that there was also a bit of disgust in their eyes. What, is there still discrimination against women in this place? The outside world knew very little about Wano, because they closed their borders, and the intelligence from the Marines only included geographical names and the distribution of forces, completely ignorant of the local customs of Wano. So, were women in Wano supposed to be housewives? And what's wrong with her dressing? Isn't this a fairly conservative dress on the open sea? But thinking carefully, it seemed that there weren't any women dressed like her on the way here. But She looked at the man who was about to touch her, and her eyes gradually turned cold. Splat! In the eyes of everyone's gaze, the hand that the drunken man reached out. Suddenly, it was cut off. And seemed to have been standing still without any movement, and no one could see what had happened. In any case, it seemed that at that moment, the man's hand was cut off. The man didn't react at first, but when the blood suddenly splashed out, he let out a painful scream. Ah! The man fell to the ground in pain, rolling all over the floor. And looked at the man with some disgust, then walked past him directly and into the crowd. There was a commotion among the crowd, and the security personnel nearby quickly rushed over. What a hassle! Inside, she just wanted to inquire about some information. How did it suddenly turn out like this? She resisted the impulse to burst out in house hoku haki and knock everyone unconscious, but obviously, it was impossible to inquire about information from the card game now. So, should she just go in hard? Chapter 185 Looking for Hyogoro. If she were still Roger, she wouldn't mind if others were meddling around. Especially when he was in a good mood, he wouldn't care about such minor characters at all. But now she's not Roger, she's An. Wasn't that kind of address just now insulting enough? And looked coldly at the people in the gambling den, seeing the security personnel approaching. She knew she couldn't use conventional methods anymore, so let's just go in hard. Who's your boss? Oh, here to cause trouble. At this moment, a man walked out from the crowd, wearing a samurai sword and chewing on a straw. He looked at An fiercely and said in a rough voice, "It's been a long time since anyone dared to mess with us." He gestured with his eyes to the people around him, and the security guards drew their long knives from their waists and quickly approached An. The people in the gambling den became excited, but instead of making a loud noise, they whispered to each other, as if they were afraid of offending this gambling den. An looked at them boredly, suddenly appeared next to the man who had stepped forward, and already had a short knife in her hand. At this moment, the knife was placed on the man's neck. The man's pupils shrank, and the security guards from before seemed to have no idea what had happened. Such fast speed! The man was about to roar, but the next moment, he found that all those security guards who were rushing towards An a moment ago had a slash on their backs, and blood spurted out from the slashes the next moment, spraying directly into the room. Ah! The moment blood gushed out, it aroused fear in people's hearts. Those who were waiting for a good show in the gambling den suddenly panicked, screaming loudly, and then quickly ran towards the door. And didn't stop them, just looked at the man whose neck she had a knife to. However, this man was quite courageous. Although he had a bit of fear being held at knife point by her, he tried hard not to show that fear. He whispered, "Miss, are you going to be enemies with the Hyogoro family?" And narrowed her eyes. "It seems like I've never been the one to start trouble, right?" She leaned close to the man's ear and said softly, "From the beginning, that man was the one who provoked me. Now you're saying that I'm going to be enemies with the Hyogoro family." The man's body stiffened, and he quickly said, "We mishandled this matter, but now you've disrupted our business, isn't that enough? I know you're strong, but behind us is Hanako Toba Hyogoro." Hanako Toba Hyogoro. And noted down this name. This should be the head of the underworld, but she didn't know the scale. "Take me to see your boss," and said after thinking for a moment. "Don't worry, I have no intention of being enemies with you. I just want to talk to your boss." "You?" The man seemed a bit angry after hearing Anne's words, but at this moment, his life was at Anne's whim, so he could only say, "Fine, but I advise you not to provoke Boss Hyogoro. Just mind your own business." And naturally had her own plans. She put away her short knife, and the man suddenly began to breathe heavily, gasping for air. The man looked at Anne with fear. He didn't resist because he knew Anne's strength far surpassed his. Just now, Anne's action was to cut one of his subordinates with one knife each, and then appeared behind him with a knife to his neck. Such actions were very complicated, but she completed them in the blink of an eye, and he and his men didn't even see her figure. He glanced at his subordinates again, while Anne clapped her hands, then put her hands in the pockets of her jacket. At the same time, she said, "You can rest assured, my knife just now wasn't fatal, they won't die." "I understand," the man let out a sigh and obeyed. "Please follow me." And found that strength was indeed the most useful. As long as the strength was there, everything could be negotiated. But sometimes it might not have any effect. Just like now. She followed the man into the Hyagoro family, but there was no one in the Hyagoro family now. And the man leaned against the shadow of the wall, looking at the huge mansion ahead. It was obvious that it was a place where quite dignified people lived. But at this moment, the mansion was surrounded by a large number of warriors, and a man walked out from inside. The man had a high forehead, his whole head was like a flat ellipse, and he was wearing a purple kimono. He seemed to be above the warriors outside. That's Fukuro Kyuchu, a ninja of the Oniwe Banshu. Strange, how come they're at Boss Hyagoro's house? The man looked surprised when he saw this scene. Could your boss have been arrested? And noted the situation there and frowned. Is it such a coincidence? Just arrived and encountered such a thing? The man quickly said, it's impossible. Boss Hyagoro is a legitimate hero. How could he be arrested? And closed her eyes, she enhanced her hearing, and her observation haki was powerful enough to make all her senses extremely sensitive. Has Hyagoro really left? Yeah, there's no trace of him here anymore. Darn it, could he really have any contact with thieves? He almost killed the future general of Wano. Is he rebelling? I just wanted to find out about him at first, but now it seems he might really have a problem. I suggest issuing a wanted order. This, isn't it bad? Tsukamoto has a good relationship with Hyagoro's family, right? Then report the situation here to the general first and see what the general says next. After hearing these words, Anne opened her eyes. Are you Hyagoro's subordinate? Anne no longer looked at the mansion, she had completely entered the shadow, and the man quickly followed. Yes, what's going on? He knew that Anne had great abilities, and she might really know something. Hyagoro is suspected of rebellion and has left Hanako Toba. I advise you to quickly disassociate yourself from Hyagoro. Anne said calmly. At this time, they had already left that street and returned to the bright road. On this familiar road, Anne suddenly thought of the man and woman she had seen on her way here. Hyagoro left, and it should be very recently, then. Could it be them? The man and the woman were also leaving in the direction of the city gate with some bundles on their backs. Moreover, they disguised themselves so that people couldn't see their faces clearly, especially the man who wore a hood. Maybe he's Hyagoro? Chapter 186 The Appearance of Toguro. What do you mean by this? The man was still puzzled, but Anne had already decided to verify her suspicions. She said directly, consider this your reward for bringing me here. Things are likely to get messy here soon. If you don't want to die, not only should you not claim any association with Hyagoro, but it's best to hide. Keeping such a role might be useful in the future, so Anne hinted, you must have noticed the samurais and ninjas. They are here for Hyagoro. If Hyagoro hasn't done anything wrong, would such a force come? She stopped there because she didn't have much time to waste here. Whether the man understood or not was up to him. If he still got into trouble, and didn't need such a foolish person as a potential informant. So after speaking, she immediately disappeared. She ran in the direction she had come from before, already releasing her observation haki. Her observation haki could cover a radius of 10 kilometers. In some countries on the high seas, she could cover the entire nation with her observation haki. But Wano was a large country, comparable to Alabasta. Naturally, and couldn't cover the entire country. However, as long as Hyagoro hadn't left this area, she should be able to sense him. However, there were too many people here. She was not familiar with Hyagoro, and at most, she had only seen him in passing. It would be a difficult task to identify him and his wife quickly. Observation haki couldn't reveal someone's true identity, it could only differentiate by body shape and gender. That is to say, she had to find two people with the corresponding body shape, a man and a woman together. However, at this moment, she discovered someone quite unexpected. Why is he here? And continued to run towards the outskirts of the city. Before identifying Hyagoro and his wife, she wanted to meet someone else. Or rather, another devil. Why are you here? Outside Flower Capital, Anne appeared directly in front of a man. He wore black trousers on his lower body and a grey checkered shirt on his upper body. He also wore black sunglasses and had a crew cut. He was tall, much taller than Anne. He seemed to be preparing to enter the Flower Capital, but Anne appeared directly in front of him. The man naturally saw Anne, but he showed no emotional fluctuations, just saying calmly, where I appear should not be anyone's concern. It's strange for a Navy admiral to appear in a place like this, isn't it? And glanced at the crowd around them and said quietly, Trafalgar Law, I always thought you weren't on the same path as those demons. Yes, the person who appeared in front of An was Trafalgar Law. Although Trafalgar Law was also a devil, he was a half-devil. Moreover, judging from his previous actions, he just wanted to collect the 4 soul jewels to gain eternal life. This was a common desire among most humans, so gradually, people didn't treat him like they treated demons. After becoming a Navy admiral, An naturally gained access to a lot of confidential information. She didn't know how Trafalgar Law appeared when she was still Roger, but now she could freely access his information in the Navy's intelligence room. According to Navy intelligence, Trafalgar Law was originally just a human from the Sabaody Archipelago. Although he was very strong, he was aging. Zero gave Trafalgar Law a way out, which was to become a devil. After becoming a devil, one could obtain eternal life. However, Zero could only turn people into half-devils. To become a complete devil, one needed the 4 soul jewels. That was why Trafalgar Law was so obsessed with them. In other words, Trafalgar Law was a new type of half-devil unrelated to the demons of thousands of years ago. So people's views on him naturally differed from those of Spondam, Gecko Moria, and others. After all, Trafalgar Law's behavior was more like that of a pirate than a demon. Roger had dealt with Trafalgar Law several times before, but now he appeared in Wano, in a country where a demon lord might appear in the future. This naturally aroused Anne's suspicion. I never need anyone to walk the same path as me, and I won't walk the same path as anyone else, Trafalgar Law said calmly. They stood in place having a conversation, and it was quite cold. It looked strange to the people around them, but they both exuded a strong aura that kept others at bay. Hearing Trafalgar Law's words, Anne frowned. Are you here for the 4 soul jewels? I don't need to answer your question, Trafalgar Law said, hands in his pockets, walking past Anne nonchalantly. Anne stood still and didn't make a move. It would be too conspicuous to act here. It would surely attract the attention of many people, and that would undoubtedly expose her presence. She was here to investigate covertly. Moreover, there wouldn't be much to gain by acting. Trafalgar Law wasn't someone like the man in the gambling den. He was extremely powerful, comparable to her. Because they were not of the same type. Anne chose to focus on observation haki for her investigation, but Trafalgar Law was purely a monster of strength. She had been in a state of full observation haki before. Naturally, she used weakness perception, but she found that Trafalgar Law's body had no weaknesses at all. This monster had trained his body to be like an iron wall, containing explosive power in every inch. It was too much of a headache to deal with such an enemy. It was better to leave it to Roger later. After all, she and Roger shared intelligence. She turned her head and looked deeply at Trafalgar Law, who was walking towards the flower capital, then looked ahead again. Trafalgar Law's appearance was just an episode. The most important thing was still to find Hagora and his wife. Anne had a vague feeling that whatever happened in Hagora's house might be the origin of everything. But it was a bit troublesome. She had spent too much time in Flower Capital, causing Hagora and others to likely have left her range of observation haki. After all, they seemed to be in a hurry, and Hagora should have sensed that something was likely wrong with her, so their pace would naturally be fast. However, no matter how fast they were, they couldn't be faster than Anne, not to mention that Hagora was also carrying a bunch of things and his wife. Found them. After advancing a certain distance forward, Anne suddenly caught sight of 2 figures. Chapter 187 Kill them all. Hagora left the flower capital with his wife. Isn't this too hasty? His wife had never quite understood. Even with all the trust, the sudden decision to leave their home, where they had lived for many years, was bewildering. Trust me, it's my intuition, Hagora said. He thought of Odin's demeanor back then and felt uncomfortable. Odin seemed carefree, but in reality, it was because he rarely suffered losses. He was able to hunt tigers and bears at a young age and became famous in the criminal underworld of Wano as he grew older. He seemed to have gone through a lot, but everything had always been smooth sailing for him. Now, after suffering such a huge loss at Kineman's hands, he even nearly died at his hands. Perhaps he couldn't handle such a blow. Hagora knew that many people undergo changes in personality after being on the brink of death. He was worried that Odin was one of them because he had never suffered such a big loss before. Haegora and Kin Eamon clashed because Odin was so determined to retaliate, wanting to reclaim his dignity by killing Kin Eamon. But he knew that both Himura Kin Eamon and his master, Hitetsu Kurajuro, were not to be trifled with. It would take all the military strength of Wano to deal with the two of them. Are Himura and Hitetsu really that powerful? His wife couldn't help but sigh. I know you value loyalty, but even if Odin is our friend and was almost killed, what's wrong with helping him? Do we have to give up everything we had before for the sake of two people we might not see for years? Loyalty is just one aspect. The important thing is that they won't go down without a fight, Haegora said immediately. You don't understand them, which is why you say that, but I know Hitetsu's strength is unfathomable. I've seen him in action before, and in that moment, I even thought he was the legendary sword god Ryama of Wano. Sword god Ryama. He was a legendary swordsman in Wano's folklore who could slay dragons in the sky and once single-handedly repelled the world government. His swordsmanship reached the pinnacle, and the people of Wano worshipped him as a god of the sword. Now, Haegora compared Hitetsu to Ryama, showing his admiration for him. His wife was shocked. After a moment of thought, she asked, "Where are we going now?" Haegora had already chosen the location. They were heading north towards the northern region of Wano, which was the town of Kibi in the 6 regions of Wano. After telling his wife about this place, she couldn't help but say, "But isn't that the most desolate place in Wano?" "It's precisely because it's desolate that it's safe. Let's go to Kibi now and see how the situation in Wano develops," Haegora said. He wasn't afraid and cowardly. Instead, he wanted to observe the situation first. He had reached this point not just by recklessness alone. They were already walking briskly as they talked. However, at this moment, a woman's figure suddenly appeared in front of them. She had blue hair and was wearing a light blue jacket, with her lower body showing white legs. It was quite inappropriate. At this moment, the woman leaned against a tree, arms crossed, looking at the two of them with playful eyes, smiling lightly as she asked, "How do you plan to develop?" Haegora's eyes narrowed, and he reached out to protect his wife behind him, his other hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Who are you?" Haegora looked at him coldly. At this moment, he remembered seeing this woman in the flower capital before, although it was just a brief glance. But Anne's style of dress was indeed not in line with Wano's, so Haegora remembered her deeply. She was in the flower capital before, and now she appeared in front of him, which could only mean that she came for him. "Don't be so nervous," Anne said calmly. "I'm here to help you." Shortly after seeing Trafalgar Law, Anne found Haegora. It was almost at the limit of her observation haki, which was 10 kilometers away. To catch up with this 10 kilometers, she had to run with all her might to appear in front of Haegora. Seeing Haegora's cautious expression, she inserted her hands into her pockets and stood up straight, facing the two of them. "As you thought, I am not from Wano. I came to this country to investigate some things, and those things may lead to the destruction of this country." "The destruction of this country?" Haegora couldn't help but laugh. "Wano has never welcomed outsiders. Do you think I'll believe your words?" "You've already believed," Anne tooted, looking at Haegora with scrutinizing eyes. "Because you have already sensed the danger in advance. Otherwise, why would you risk your life to leave the flower capital? And why did samurais and ninjas surround your residence shortly after you left?" Haegora's heart sank. He hadn't expected to be right. The Kojiki family actually sent people to surround his house. And was right. He did sense the danger in advance. But he looked at Anne with some suspicion. How did this woman know so clearly? "I said, there is a disaster in Wano, a disaster that will not only destroy Wano but also affect the entire world. Do you think I care about your small country of Wano?" Anne coldly sneered. "Your country is self-contained, so let it perish on its own. Even if everyone dies, it has nothing to do with me." Her gaze was cold, making Haegora shiver. "But I won't let your death be a sacrifice for the demons. That's all there is to it. You better not think too highly of yourselves." Anne had to take a tough stance to make Haegora cooperate with her quickly, and what she said was not a lie. Although she didn't think so, if she didn't gain much, the world government would forcibly dispatch a large number of troops to carry out an island-destroying operation against Wano. Don't think that Wano is invincible just because it occupies a strategic location. The reason why the world government failed in Wano before was simply because they didn't need to expend too much military force for such a country. But now that it involves a demon lord, no sacrifice is too great. Moreover, now that the world government has a black religious organization under its control, with just one powerful navy, and with the addition of the black religious organization, Wano is absolutely unable to resist. By then, the world government would choose to kill all the people of Wano. Let alone Wano being a non-allied country of the world government, even if there was another Jartsburg incident, they would definitely not hesitate to take action. If no clues were found, then kill them all. Chapter 188 Cooperation. Since we can't find the demon, since we can't find the person summoning the demon, then let's carry out an island-destroying operation, devastating every inch of land on the entire island, and if necessary, even completely destroy all of Wano. Just like in the Valley of the Gods before. Atru's appearance made people realize the power of the Demon Lord. The last time, it was only through luck and cooperation from many sides that Atrus was finally repelled. This was largely because Atru's weakness was too obvious. He needed flesh and blood to sustain his existence. When he had plenty of flesh and blood, he was naturally incredibly powerful. But as time passed, once there was no more flesh and blood to replenish, his physical functions would decline. But the next demon lord wouldn't have this weakness. So how would they deal with it then? Therefore, in order to prevent the demon lord from appearing, the world government is willing to pay any price. And didn't want to see that scene happen. According to her understanding of the other admirals, Aokiji and Kizaru should also not agree. The three admirals of the navy still had some bottom lines. However, K definitely wouldn't care about such matters, and neither would the world government, not to mention Makima in the black religious organization. Anyway, it's better not to let things develop to that point, right? Soen must quickly investigate the truth of the matter. At this moment, she looked at Hagora and knew that he was a breakthrough point. Hagora also looked at An. He certainly didn't believe An's words so quickly, but there was a strong aura emanating from An, which firmly suppressed him here. He also thought for a long time, and the three of them stood here. Two of them were carrying many things. Okay, I'll tell you what happened. After thinking for a long time, Hagora decided to just say it. This wasn't considered highly confidential information. And if what An said was true, it would be better to resolve it as soon as possible. It would be good to use this matter to test An. If her performance could convince him, they could continue to cooperate. If she was lying to him, then that would be the end of it. Let's keep walking. An glanced at Hagora's back and turned around. Someone is chasing us from behind. Let's talk while we walk. Hagora subconsciously turned his head to look, but he didn't see anyone else. He had a strong haki, and he could even use the advanced haki technique to bind with his armament haki, known as flowing sakura in Wano, but he didn't have observation haki like An, so he couldn't sense things from a distance like she could. He and his wife followed An, and then they talked about what had happened before. Meanwhile, in the flower capital, while Hagora and An were discussing the incidents involving Odin and Kenshin. What? Boss Hagora ran away. In the medical room, Ken Iman looked at his father, Kojiki Sukiyaki, with surprise. Yes, with his wife. Kojiki Sukiyaki looked at the horrifying wound on Ken Iman's body with some anger. I thought he was a hero, so I've been turning a blind eye to him for so many years. But he actually did such a thing. Ken Iman gritted his teeth, and the scene of Kenshin killing him flashed in his mind again. A black light flashed in his eyes, and endless anger accumulated in his heart. Damn it! Boss Hagora actually left the flower capital because of that Kenshin. Ken Iman knew that Boss Hagora left because he didn't want to betray Kenshin and the others. He considered himself to have a good relationship with Boss Hagora. But after Kenshin almost killed him, he actually chose to stand with Kenshin. Damn it! Ken Iman was furious. I must find that Kenshin and get revenge. Lord Ken Iman. As soon as he finished speaking, several people rushed in from outside the door. They looked at Ken Iman lying on the bed with worried expressions. Kimwarimon, Denjiro, Komurasake, Otama, Kanjay, Reis, why are you all here in the flower capital? Ken Iman's anger decreased slightly as he looked at his retainers, and the anger in his heart wasn't as intense as before. We all heard about Lord Ken Iman's injuries and rushed to the flower capital without stopping for a moment. Are you okay? Ken Eamon sighed lightly. It should be better after a while. By the way, where's Ashuradaji? He's staying in Kuri to guard. After all of us left, no one could be left in Kuri. Kim Warimon quickly said, should I call him over? No need. Ken Eamon took a breath. You did the right thing. Let him continue to stay in Kuri. Lord Ken Eamon, who is the scoundrel who injured you? Suddenly, a black light flashed in Ken Eamon's eyes again. He clenched his fists. Whoever he is, I want him dead. Kim Warimon and the others were also impassioned, each of them declaring, I will never let go of the scoundrel who dared to harm Lord Ken Eamon. We will go and bring him back. Ken Eamon said coldly, I will personally bring him back and then kill him. Ken Eamon felt that his strength had been continuously improving since his trip to the gates of hell. Now he was much stronger than before when he fought against Kenshin. Now, if he encountered Kenshin again, he was confident that he could defeat him. But his target wasn't just Kenshin, because he remembered what Hagora said. In addition to Kenshin, there was also a master named Hitetsu, who might even be the strongest swordsman. One Kenshin and one Hitetsu, both were Ken Eamon's targets. Ken Eamon must prove that he was stronger than them. He must be the invincible swordsman of the world. That Kenshin almost killed him, so he must kill him back. He felt his body recovering rapidly. The injuries Kenshin inflicted on him were obviously fatal, but now they were almost healed in such a short time. It was this feeling. Ken Eamon looked at his subordinates who were swearing to him. He also declared, good. Now follow me and find out the whereabouts of that Kenshin. Now. Kojiki Sukiyaki, who was beside him, looked at Ken Eamon with some concern and said, you are so seriously injured. Isn't it too much to force yourself? You can rest assured. I feel better now than at any other time, and stronger. Ken Eamon made a smile that he had never had before, a smile that looked a bit evil, and Kim Warimon and the others were stunned for a moment. He actually jumped off the bed directly, put on his clothes casually, and then walked out of the door in a carefree manner. Kojiki Sukiyaki didn't stop Ken Eamon, because he had never successfully stopped Ken Eamon from doing what he wanted to do. I hope. Kojiki Sukiyaki frowned. Nothing bad happens again. Chapter 189 Contact with Thor. So, you left the flower capital because you didn't want to betray Kenshin and his master. At this moment, on the road, Hagora and his wife walked side by side. Along the way, she had already listened to Hagora's account of what had happened before. This was somewhat different from what she had expected. She originally thought that Hagora's urgent departure from the flower capital might have been due to being threatened by a demon. But now it seems. Wasn't it just a matter of a prince almost being killed, and then wanting to go back for revenge? This wasn't really that surprising. She felt a bit disappointed. She had thought that she might get some clues as soon as she arrived in Wano. You can understand it that way. Hagora sighed. I told Mayuden not to go after Kenshin, but I didn't expect something like this to happen anyway. I never imagined Kenshin would strike so hard. Anne's mind stirred. She asked curiously, in your understanding of Kenshin, isn't he such a person? No, actually, strictly speaking, I don't know him. Hagora looked up slightly, as if recalling past events. When I met Hitetsu, he had just taken Kenshin as his disciple. At that time, Kenshin was still young, and Hitetsu took him to many places, letting him train in swordsmanship at various dojos. Because many people regarded me as boss Hagora, some people told me about this. One time when Hitetsu was heading to the dojo as usual, I saw him. I know Hitetsu quite well. He's a rather negative person. I don't know what he went through, but his character really has major flaws. He's very negative, believing that swordsmen will only be used by others. Later, I spent some time with them as master and disciple, but at that time, Kenshin was still too young. I couldn't compare his character then with what it is now. As for later, after Hitetsu left with Kenshin, I rarely saw them. Kenshin followed Hitetsu to learn. It's very likely that he learned Hitetsu's negative attitude, but I didn't expect him to be so ruthless towards Mayuda. Listening to Hagora's words, and could hear the heaviness in his speech. He must be in a difficult position. Mayuda is his junior and friend, Hitetsu is his friend, and Kenshin is his junior. He's caught between them and doesn't know what to do. so he could only leave the flower capital and let things unfold naturally. Button was very interested in Hotetsu Kurajuro and Kenshin Himura. She wondered, since Hotetsu knew that swordsmen would only be used by others, he should have been more cautious in his actions. And Kenshin had studied under him for so many years. He shouldn't have resorted to killing so easily. So what happened in between? And glanced at Hagora. She knew that Hagora probably didn't know Kenshin's whereabouts either, otherwise he could just go and see for himself. After thinking for a moment, she said, I have some doubts in my heart, but let's see how things develop later. Her attitude was similar to Hagora's in this regard. With so few visible clues, she said to Hagora, where are you planning to settle down? Can I trouble you? You want to stay with us? Hagora looked at Anne in surprise. Is that not possible? Anne knew this was a bit presumptuous, but her personality was actually a bit like Roger's, so she didn't feel embarrassed to say it. After all, they were the same person in the past, so there was nothing to be embarrassed about. Of course not. Hagora really wanted to say that, but he knew Anne was very strong, and if they could avoid conflict, it would be best. And he also wanted to see what Anne really wanted to do. As an outsider coming to Wano and saying scary things, he was also very concerned. If Anne was a malicious person, he could prepare in time. Mainly, you, a woman, staying with us, isn't it inappropriate? Oh, that. Anne said casually, why are your customs so troublesome? It's not like we're sharing a bed or anything. Okay, if you don't mind, then I won't say much more. Before, I left behind a base here in Kibi. Let's go there and see what happens next. For Hagora, the best outcome would be nothing happening at all. He just hoped that Mayuta was acting in the heat of the moment, and when the anger in his heart was calmed, there would be no more trouble. He also hoped that Kenshin and the others wouldn't show up again for the time being, letting peace suppress the anger. As for Anne, the best outcome for her was chaos, because only in chaos would the hidden demons emerge. In her mind, both Mayuta and Kenshin were suspicious figures, especially since she didn't have any more clues now. By nightfall, they had arrived at their destination. Kibi was indeed a relatively deserted area, with few people on this piece of land separated by a river. But after all, it was a large area of Wano, so this few was only in comparison to the flower capital. Hagora had left a retreat here a long time ago when he was still a big brother in the underworld. The base he mentioned was not in the city, but in a remote little mountain. And was quite satisfied with this place. At least it wasn't so conspicuous. As an outsider, she wouldn't attract so much attention coming in and out. But since you are going to stay in Wano for a while, I suggest you accept Wano's customs. In this base, which covered more than 300 square meters, there were 4 houses. Hagora led Anne into one of the rooms and glanced at her attire before saying. Anne thought about it and nodded. Hagora's words made sense. She should indeed adapt to the local culture, especially since she was here to infiltrate. There are 2 kimonos inside, they belong to my wife. I don't know if they'll fit you, but just wear them for now. Hagora handed Anne a package. Anne took it and said sincerely, thank you very much. I will definitely find the demon hidden in Wano. I hope you never find it. Hagora sighed and then left. Anne knew Hagora wasn't cursing her for being futile. He was saying he hoped there were no demons in Wano. If there weren't any, she naturally wouldn't find any. Anne also hoped there weren't any, but she knew this hope was non-existent. Because after Hagora left, she had already started contacting Raijin through a Den Mushi, and Raijin had already arrived in Wano. I found the Swallower, but he found me too. I lost track of him. Raijin's words made Anne's heart sink. If the Swallower was here, then is it a fake? Swallower, Hyogoro. These 2 people, they are both very strong demons. Chapter 190 The Chaos of Wano Country. Tombstone, she had never crossed paths with. But as an admiral of the navy, she witnessed the entire Jalsberg incident, so she also knew that Tom Bastoni was a major demon, and about the events of the war between Wano, Sengoku, and Kappo. On the other hand, Toguro, her, had dealt with many times, and Toguru's strength had also gained her approval. Currently, among the demons that have appeared, the strongest overall strength undoubtedly belongs to the demon lords, followed by the major demons, and then the common demons. Currently, among the demon lords, there's Adokasu, and possibly the demon that may appear in Wano. According to the information she obtained in the Jalsberg secret scrolls, this demon is very likely to be the owner of Tom Bastoni, a demon lord called Zemetian Lai. As for the major demons, there are currently Tom Bastoni, Shaokai, Kraken, and Toguru. Toguru and Kraken are both half-demons, but their strength is indeed at this level. There are plenty of common demons, like the demon Little Dragon, most of which were dealt with by the Black Order. And now, 2 major demons have already appeared in Wano. She really doesn't believe that there won't be any demon lords appearing here. Since it has been confirmed that there are anomalies in Wano, all they can do is to do their best to prevent that scene from happening. Moreover, dealing with demons might also give her more clues about Marikema. After all, most of the clues she currently has about Marikema were obtained from dealing with Adokasu last time. Adokasu mentioned a control when he was injured, and Aokiji directly made her split from Roger and also asked her to investigate the control. So, what will she get this time? She also mentioned what happened here, including meeting Toguru, and some information she got from Hagora. They discussed it again and decided to wait for a while longer. And this wait lasted for more than 2 months. During these 2 months, Anne had already adapted to the culture and customs of Wano. She now returned to this base in a kimono with a calm and elegant demeanor. Although her blue hair was still very conspicuous, it was much better than before. Only after returning to the base did she relax. She ran her hand through her hair, and her blue locks fluttered in the wind. Hagora happened to open the door at this time. Seeing Anne, he wasn't surprised. He just said, "So, did you gain anything this time?" His face carried a melancholic expression, and Anne knew why. During these 2 months, drastic changes had occurred in Wano. Tsukuyomi Mayuta seemed to have truly harbored resentment towards Kenshin Himura. The shogunate ordered a nationwide hunt for Kenshin Himura, and the entire Wano was stirred. The daimyos of various regions dispatched their own troops. Every time Anne entered, she could see soldiers searching the streets. For a while, the people were in a panic. Even soldiers frequently went outside the city for searches, not even sparing the desolate mountains and wild ridges. They had visited here too. If it weren't for Anne's exceptional Kanbunshoku haki and Hagora's well-hidden base, they probably would have been discovered. Even relatively desolate areas like Hibi Township had become like this, let alone other regions. Anne had almost traveled all over Wano during this time and found chaos everywhere, especially in the flower capital, where numerous swordsmen were shuttling back and forth, seemingly wanting to search every corner. But after more than 2 months of searching, they obviously had no findings. So the intensity of the search was increasing, and their base might be discovered at any time. Anne wasn't afraid, but it would be troublesome. Even those people from Kyuri have been released. What does Mayuta want to do? Hagora was truly angry. He punched a tree in the courtyard, causing a large number of leaves to fall. Kyuri, the territory of Tsukuyomi Mayuta, who, besides being the heir to the shogunate of Wano, was also the daimyo of Kyuri. Originally, Kyuri was a chaotic area, a paradise for villains. After Tsukuyomi Mayuta arrived there, he defeated the head of the villains, Azuradiji, and became the head of Kyuri. Later, he was also ennobled as the daimyo of Kyuri by Tsukuyomi Koshiki. And now, in order to find Kenshin Himura, Tsukuyomi Mayuta even released those villains from Kyuri. Although it had been developed for several years, it was only a few years. They were villains for 10 or 20 years. Those who had not been thoroughly improved were released, and they also transformed into official samurai. With great power, they used the excuse of searching to do what they used to do, and for a while, the entire Wano was in chaos. It was normal for Hagora, as a member of Wano, to react like this. He should regret it very much now. If that day he hadn't let Tsukuyomi Mayuta see Kenshin Himura, nothing would have happened. However, there is no regret medicine in this world. This time, I did find out something. Anne said in a deep voice. What? Hagora looked at Anne instantly, somewhat excitedly said, Is Kenshin exposed? Anne shook her head. No, I found out that those samurai aren't just looking for people. Not just people. Hagora was stunned for a moment, then frowned. He was puzzled, what else are they looking for? She looked at Hagora and said seriously, They are still looking for corpses. Corpses? Hagora's brows furrowed even tighter. How could they be looking for corpses again? How did you find out? There is a cemetery not far from here, and I saw those samurai digging up all the graves. And thought of this scene, feeling a bit eerie. What was happening in Wano? How could they do such a thing? Aren't they afraid of the punishment of the gods and ghosts? Hagora was angry. They are desecrating the dead. And had recently learned some customs of Wano, so she could understand Hagora's words. At the same time, she was also very curious about what the Tsukuyomi family was doing. I think we can't go on like this. And looked at Hagora. He was much taller than her, so she looked up at his face with some seriousness. The covert investigation has ended, and now it's your turn to. Hagora knew what it meant. He was highly respected in the underworld of Wano, with extensive connections. And was asking him to utilize his channels to investigate the recent events. He gritted his teeth and said, "All right." He didn't want to wait any longer either. The actions of the Tsukuyomi family had already angered him. He might be part of the underworld, but he was also a man of honor. And felt somewhat relieved in her heart. Hagora had broad connections, so he should be able to find out something. But what concerned her was her contact with Roger had disappeared. Chapter 191 Saving People. The disappearance of contact with Roger wasn't a recent event, it happened shortly after Roger and his crew arrived in Wano. It was very strange. When they weren't in Wano, there were no issues, but as soon as they were both in Wano, they couldn't feel each other anymore. Because of this, and felt increasingly suspicious about Wano. Each demon lord was extremely troublesome, and they also had mysterious abilities. Could it be that the severance of her connection with Roger was also the work of a demon lord? Only they could possibly achieve such a thing. Thinking of this, she followed Hagora outside. This time they were heading to the home of one of Hagora's former subordinates. Although he was still part of the underworld was now mobilizing under the orders of the shogunate and the daimyos. So they speculated that the underworld might also know something from the shogunate or the daimyos, or at least they would know what they were looking for. So they sneaked into Hibi City. And could come and go as she pleased, but Hagora couldn't because he was now wanted. However, this kind of wanted status couldn't stop them. Hagora was still powerful in Wano, and after so many years in the underworld, he was familiar with these things, so they easily entered the city. The atmosphere inside the city was tense, and the flow of people couldn't compare to the flower capital. There were only a few people, all of whom looked hurried, as if there was some great danger in the city. After An and Hagora sneaked in, they cautiously proceeded in one direction and soon arrived in front of a mansion. From the outside, it looked like a wealthy household. Hagora was about to knock on the door carefully when An suddenly grabbed his shoulder. Hagora turned to look at An, only to see her shaking her head solemnly. He furrowed his brows, but in the next moment, he understood An's meaning. He saw her walk to another corner and then gently jump up. Something was wrong? Hagora followed An's lead and sneaked in from that position. Although he was much larger than An and not as strong, there was no problem jumping over a wall. What happened? They were behind a tree in the courtyard, a large tree big enough to conceal their figures. Leaning against the tree, An smiled faintly after hearing Hagora's question. It seems they are deliberately targeting you. There are many people in the yard. She had been using Kanbunshoku haki constantly on her way here. If Hagora had come alone, there would definitely have been trouble, but with her, it was different. What should we do? Force our way in? Hagora frowned. No need for that. An's lips curled up. She straightened her body and then walked out slowly. Hagora was shocked. He was about to say something but suddenly felt a tremendous pressure. He vaguely saw something seem to release from An's body, and in an instant, the world became incredibly silent. Let's go. An walked straight ahead and said slowly, go see your friend. Hagora stared blankly at An. From here, he could see many people suddenly falling from trees, roofs, or behind stones. What did she just do? Just in an instant, so many people fell? Hagora felt himself trembling a bit. Sweat dripped from his body passively. Even though An hadn't actively released that power towards him, he still felt the immense pressure. It was truly astonishing. He quickly caught up with An. Unable to help himself, he asked, what did you just do? An smiled calmly. Kanbunshoku haki. Don't tell others. After joining the navy, she hadn't mentioned her Kanbunshoku haki. After all, in the navy, having Kanbunshoku haki might make others think you're unstable. And actually had a dream of becoming an admiral. But her Kanbunshoku haki was not weak, it was even quite strong. After all, it was directly split from Roger. How could it be weak? Originally, Roger's Kanbunshoku haki was already among the strongest on the sea, and after several enhancements, especially with the portable poneglyph, Roger's Kanbunshoku haki had reached the limit strength of this world. Although there was no longer a portable poneglyph, that feeling had been deeply imprinted in Roger's soul, which further improved his Kanbunshoku haki. And was also a part of Roger, so she naturally had powerful Kanbunshoku haki. These people were actually quite strong, but they were only strong relative to the people of this country. Such people were everywhere on the sea, so when swept by Anne's Kanbunshoku haki, they all fainted. They swaggered into the house, and only saw two men fainting inside. These two men faced each other, one of them was tied up and covered in wounds. Maidabee. Hagora hurried over. And also knew who this man was. She had investigated during this time. He was the leader of Hibi's underworld, known as Snake Eyes Maidabee, and he also admired Hagora very much. "Don't worry, he just fainted," Anne said softly. "Let's take him away first." "What about the others?" Hagora looked at the other fainting man. Obviously, the wounds on Maidabee's body were caused by him. "It's up to you," Anne said indifferently. Anyway, they were just some small fries, and she didn't care much. Hagora had now implicitly recognized Anne as the leader, because he found Anne to be perfect. She was powerful, mysterious, and perfect in every way. After 2 months of contact, he increasingly felt that he couldn't afford to offend Anne. So he asked Anne how to deal with it. After hearing her answer, he immediately drew the sword from his waist and stabbed the man's heart with one blow. At this moment, Anne had already reopened the door of the room. While leaving, she asked again, "Does Maidabee have a wife? If so, take her with us. Otherwise, it would become a weakness." No, Hagora shook his head. "He's still young. Don't worry." Anne nodded, and then they quickly left. At this moment, Hagora's dissatisfaction with the Tsukuyomi family had reached a very high level. Being wanted was one thing, but to do this to his friends was unforgivable. He clenched his fist tightly, and his eyes released angry flames. In the end, it was because of Tsukuyomi Mita's own insistence on provoking Kenshin, and after being severely injured by Kenshin, he turned into this appearance. It really hurt him, but he had no more pain now, only resentment. Chapter 192 Angry Hyagoro, looking for the Miko's body. He couldn't accept that the Tsukuyomi family had caused such chaos in all of Wano over this matter. Even when Hibi was deserted before, there were definitely not as few people on the streets as there are now. There were just a few people rushing around like thieves. Considering himself a knight-errant, his actions naturally had to live up to the word knight. However, he had previously been suppressed by the Tsukuyomi family's name because they wanted loyalty to the shogun. Wano was the Tsukuyomi family's Wano, and they should be in charge of this country. Even the underworld was allowed to exist within the Tsukuyomi family's rule. This was the culture that the people of Wano had accepted for generations, and even now, they believed in it themselves. But at this moment, his anger gave birth to a terrible idea. Back home, Maidabee still hadn't woken up. He sat outside the corridor with a grim face. "What's wrong? You look like you're deep in thought," and walked over at this time, noticing his strange expression, and asked curiously. Hagora knew Anne wasn't from Wano, so telling her his thoughts shouldn't be considered treasonous. So he expressed what he was thinking. After listening, Hagora looked hopefully at Anne, wanting to hear her response. But Anne burst into laughter, a hearty laugh, so happy that tears even came out. "What are you laughing at?" Hagora asked indignantly. "I'm laughing because you finally look like someone." Anne laughed as she spoke. "This is the mentality that warriors of the sea should have. If you're dissatisfied, you should let it out. Being bound by rules all the time is just stupid. With that said, I approve of you now. If it were up to you, what would you choose?" "The Shimatsuki family." Hagora thought for a moment before saying, "The Shimatsuki family has a lot of prestige in Wano. If they mobilize troops now, it must be because of the shogun's orders. If we can make the Shimatsuki family become the shogun, then everything should improve, right?" However, his answer greatly displeased Anne. She put away her previous smile and scolded, "Idiot! How can you let your reputation overthrow the shogun? That's the old order. Are you dissatisfied with the Tsukuyomi family, or is it the Shimotsuki family that's dissatisfied with the Tsukuyomi family? If it's your own dissatisfaction, why don't you do something about it yourself? How can that be? Hagora couldn't help but say, but before he could continue, An interrupted him coldly. How can it not be? Hagora sat in place, unable to speak, and said nothing more. His mind was a bit confused now. In the history of Wano, there had been unrest, but all the unrest had been caused by the daimyos. They had never thought of rebelling against the daimyos or the shogun themselves. Even the previous uprising against the shogun was only because the Tsukuyomi family had no heir, so they had to choose a successor from among the other daimyos. When the Tsukuyomi family finally had an heir, Shimotsuki Sukiyaki, all the unrest disappeared. In their minds, loyalty to the daimyos and the shogun was a matter of course, and the daimyos' loyalty to the shogun was also a matter of course. His previous dissatisfaction with the Tsukuyomi family, and even the idea of wanting to drag them down, was only because he was in the underworld. Even the thought of that made the underworld boss break out in a cold sweat and reprimand himself for treason. So when An scolded him just now, his brain crashed, but soon Maidebe woke up, finally pulling him out of this chaotic thinking. He and An quickly returned to the room and looked at the awakened Maidebe. If you have something to discuss, I'll go outside and make medicine, Hagora's wife, who had been taking care of Maidebe before, said as she saw them come in and then left. An sat aside, watching Hagora kneel beside Maidebe. Boss. Maidebe was excited to see Hagora, and Hagora was the same. He held Maidebe's hand and said, "Sorry, I've caused trouble for you." "Don't say that, Boss Hagora." Maidebe lay there, looking at Hagora. "I am deeply impressed by your chivalry and will never betray you." "Sigh, what does the Tsukuyomi family want to do in the end? To cause all this chaos in Wano for one swordsman, for one person?" Hagora said angrily again. And watched the two of them on the side, listening to them recount recent events. Hagora first talked about what happened on his side, and then Maidebe talked about what happened to him. At first, they only received news asking them to help find the missing Hagora and another person. Upon hearing that Boss Hagora was missing, of course, they urgently mobilized the power of the underworld to find him. However, there were no clues for a long time. Until half a month ago, after the Tsukuyomi family searched for a long time and still had no information about them, they believed that someone was deliberately sheltering them, and the most likely candidates were them, the underworld, who admired Boss Hagora. So the samurai and ninjas came to Maidebe's home. After finding that Hagora was not at Maidebe's home, they lurked in his house because they believed that when Hagora had nowhere else to go, he would think of these people. "It's not just me. Suzuhase Dake, Shirayuki's Kojiro, and Usagi's Taisho are all the same," Maidebe said weakly. "This is outrageous." Hagora punched the ground. He never thought things would come to this point. He thought that even if Mida wanted revenge on Kenshin, it wouldn't lead to this. But the result was completely unexpected to him. "You said the shogun asked you to find Hagora. Besides Hagora, was there anything else?" At this point, An spoke up. Maidebe glanced at An, somewhat puzzled. Hagora quickly said, "This is An. She's the one who saved you." Maidebe hurriedly expressed his gratitude, and An waved her hand. "There's no need to thank me. Let's talk about business now." Maidebe thought for a moment and then answered An's previous question. "If you want to say it, indeed, they asked us to find something else." His expression was somewhat puzzled, as if what they were asked to find was very strange. "It's a corpse." "A corpse?" Both An and Hagora were surprised. "Yes, a corpse, a shrine maiden's corpse," Maidebe said. "Even after I was imprisoned, they kept asking me to send the underworld to find the corpse of that shrine maiden." "A shrine maiden?" An slowly closed her eyes. In the era of demons, weren't those who hunted demons and shrine maidens enemies of demons? No, in fact, they were one and the same. In some areas, demons were called yokai, and some groups of demon hunters were called shrine maidens. The Tsukuyomi family. What were they looking for the shrine maiden's corpse for? Chapter 193. Go to the flower capital again. Shrine maiden? An felt that this shrine maiden must have some connection to the demon they were looking for. Did the Tsukuyomi family also discover the demon, so they needed to find the Shrine Maiden's corpse to find a way to seal the demon? Or did they take the side of the demon and need the Shrine Maiden's corpse to bring the demon back to the mortal world? These two possibilities represented two different positions, and Anne felt a headache coming on. Thinking about these things was indeed troublesome. In the room, Anne sat on a chair, Hagora knelt beside the lying Maidabee, and the three of them didn't speak, as if they were all thinking about something. At this moment, Anne spoke up. She stood up and said softly, "I'm going back to the capital of flowers." Both Hagora and Maidabee were surprised, and Anne continued, "We probably won't find anything here anymore. I'm going to the Tsukuyomi family in the capital of flowers." Indeed, what Hibby could find out should be the same as what Maidabee mentioned. Unlike Hagora, who came to avoid disaster, and came to investigate things. At most, she was waiting for the situation in Wano to change. So she couldn't stay hidden here all the time. The intelligence here was basically obtained, and other places should be similar, so only the most important capital of flowers was left. So ultimately, she had to return to that place. But what surprised her was that Hagora also stood up. He said, "We're leaving too." Seeing Anne's surprised expression, he explained, "This place is about to be discovered. We need to relocate." Anne suddenly realized, it was for this reason. Indeed, they had been here for some time, and there had been several searches that had even come very close to their location. It was indeed time to relocate. "Then let's meet again if fate allows." Anne nodded. She had been taken care of by Hagora a lot during this time, and he was indeed someone she could get along with. This time she was going to the capital of flowers, and Hagora would definitely not go there. After they parted, it was very likely that they would not meet again. "I wonder, how will the situation in this country change?" "Well, this time we don't have a fixed location. I plan to observe the situation in this country on the way." Hagora glanced at Maidabee again and said, "We'll leave when he's feeling a bit better. If you need help, you can come to the capital of flowers to find me," Anne said. Hagora also nodded. He also knew Anne's capabilities and didn't need to be coy. In the underworld, loyalty was paramount, and helping each other when friends were in trouble was a given. He considered himself and Anne as friends now. Anne left. After descending from the mountain, she began to head south towards the capital of flowers. She retraced her steps back, but in just 2 months, everything had changed drastically. Originally, Hibby was already a desolate place, but now it was even more desolate. Along the way, she couldn't even see a single passerby. In the villages along the way, she could even see some blood, which was shocking. Even the most prosperous capital of flowers had become desolate on the outskirts. Occasionally, the people she saw were filled with sadness and despair. It was hard to imagine that it had only been 2 months. Was it worth it to turn a country into this state just to find Himura Kenshin? What she didn't know was that during these 2 months, Mitsurugi Otada was becoming stronger and stronger. And also becoming more and more evil. Capital of flowers. Mitsurugi Otada was meditating. He found that ever since he fought with Himura Kenshin, he would rapidly become stronger whenever he entered this somewhat empty state, and the power in his body would increase rapidly. Now, he was very confident that he could defeat Himura Kenshin. Even his mysterious master was no longer in his eyes. At this moment, there was a sound at the door. Mitsurugi Otada opened his eyes. At this moment, his eyes had completely turned black, making people feel a bit terrified. "Come in." As Mitsurugi's voice fell, the door was pushed open, and his subordinate, Jinimon, pushed open the door. "My lord, Lord Sukiyaki is almost at his limit." Jinimon was also a little scared after coming in. He had also noticed the changes in Mitsurugi Otada's body during this time. Although he was also angry that his lord had almost been killed, he was more afraid of the changes in his lord. However, his loyal belief still supported him to do things under Mitsurugi Otada's command. Hearing his words, Mitsurugi Otada's eyes showed a trace of displeasure. Didn't he just want to catch the murderer who almost killed him? Didn't he just want to catch Hagora, who had betrayed him? Despite always calling him Boss Hagora, he actually colluded with outsiders to kill him. After doing such things, what was wrong with catching them? Why did that old man keep stopping him? At first, his capture went smoothly, but not long ago, Mitsurugi Sukiyaki had come to him several times. The implication in his words was to stop the extensive pursuit in Wano. Of course, Mitsurugi Otada wouldn't allow it, but Mitsurugi Sukiyaki was the shogun, and the daimyos would only listen to him. It seems that this time, Mitsurugi Sukiyaki's tolerance has reached its limit. If he doesn't do anything, that old man will definitely issue an order to forcibly interrupt the search. He would never allow such a thing to happen. Mitsurugi looked at Jinemon, and after seeing Jinemon's expression, he couldn't help but playfully. Jinemon. He called out Jinemon's name, and Jinemon subconsciously looked up at Mitsurugi. Without waiting for him to speak, Mitsurugi said, "You seem very afraid of me." Jinemon's forehead heated up, and he suddenly felt a chill from his feet to his head. He trembled all over. For some reason, Mitsurugi's words seemed to echo in his ears incessantly. "The majesty of the Lord is rarely seen in the world, so I feel fear," Jinemon said nervously. "Ha ha ha," Mitsurugi couldn't help but laugh happily. "Well said. In that case, call the others over." "The others?" Mitsurugi suddenly understood that he was referring to his companions from Kurami. He originally wanted to ask what they were going to do. If it were before, he could ask in a relaxed manner, but now Mitsurugi made him feel puzzled and frightened, so he just said softly, "Yes, my lord." No matter what happened, he was still Mitsurugi Otada, who had undergone hardships. He was just mentally stimulated a little, and his heroic nature would not change. Moreover, they had already sworn allegiance to Mitsurugi Otada. Trembling, Jinemon left the house and ran towards his friend's location. Then, they would all meet Mitsurugi Otada together. Chapter 194 Kojiki Oden and the 8 Red Scabbards. "Brother Jinemon, why do you think the Lord is calling for us? Is something wrong?" In the general's mansion of the capital of flowers, Mitsurugi Otada and his retainers were gathered here. During this period of time, they hadn't returned to Kurami, but instead kept calling people out from there. For example, Ashura Daji, who was originally guarding Kurami, was also called over. But compared to the later arrival of the Kyo's Hero 9, there were now only 8 people. The guests from the Left Crows, Nikomata and Inuarashi, were missing. At this point in time, they hadn't arrived in Wano yet. However, there was one addition, Izu. Izu was Kikunoho's brother. He was originally supposed to stay on Whitebeard's ship after Mitsurugi and the others set sail, but now there seemed to be no chance for that. Currently, Izu was still under Mitsurugi's command, and at this moment, he was following Jinemon towards Mitsurugi's room. The one who just asked was Denjiro, and Denjiro had a good relationship with Jinemon. During this time, not only Jinemon but all of them felt a change in Mitsurugi Otada. So when they heard Mitsurugi calling for them, Denjiro also felt a sense of resistance. Jinemon said, "We are his retainers. We only need to obey Lord Mitsurugi's orders. He told us to go. So we must go." Because they were already loyal retainers sworn to Mitsurugi Otada. Denjiro didn't say anything more, just followed slowly behind Jinemon. The 8 of them moved forward slowly, eventually arriving outside the door where Mitsurugi Otada was. "We're here, Lord Mitsurugi. Come in." Mitsurugi Otada's voice came out, and Jinemon pushed open the door. They saw Mitsurugi Otada standing not far from the door at a table, and at the other end of the table, there was another person sitting there. That person was wearing a grey checkered shirt and a black pair of sunglasses. He had a sturdy and muscular physique, and he looked calm, as if he was talking to Mitsurugi. "Everyone's here." Mitsurugi Otada turned his head to look at the 8 of them, making them a bit nervous. "Don't be nervous. Let me introduce you." Mitsurugi Otada smiled and said, "This is Toguro, my ally." "Ally?" Jinemon was surprised. In the land of Wano, Mitsurugi Otada still needed allies? He was already a daimyo of Kurami and the heir to the shogunate. Who else did he need to ally with? "The enemies we're going to deal with next are very strong. We must increase our strength." Mitsurugi seemed to see through Jinemon's thoughts and shrugged. Then, he looked sharply at the 8 of them, his tone becoming somewhat chilling. "Have you all been getting stronger during this time?" His stern reprimand made everyone feel ashamed. As Mitsurugi's retainers, their strength was indeed weak. Of course, this weakness was relative. In fact, each of them was a strong warrior in Wano. But compared to Mitsurugi Otada and that Himura Kenshin, they were too weak. If they had encountered Himura Kenshin with Mitsurugi Otada back then, would they have been able to change the outcome of the battle? They would most likely have died together there. So they felt ashamed, and seeing their appearance, Mitsurugi Otada showed a hint of a cold smile. However, you are all my loyal retainers, and I am not stingy in rewarding my subordinates. Mitsurugi Otada approached them slowly, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. Come, I have obtained a very interesting power now, and I will bestow it upon you. Mitsurugi Otada walked up to Denjiro and said to him, reach out your hand, and I will give you my power, making you as strong as me. Really, Lord Mitsurugi? Denjiro was excited, about to reach out his hand, but he felt something was wrong. Because except for him, the others seemed to have no reaction. Even more so, he could clearly feel that someone was becoming extremely nervous. He quickly turned his head to look at the others and said, what are you guys doing? Lord Mitsurugi wants us to reach out our hands. He can make us stronger. Denjiro, look, it was Kantaro who answered him. Kantaro raised his hand nervously, pointing tremblingly ahead, look at Lord Mitsurugi. Denjiro turned his head and instantly felt his heart pounding. Because at this moment, Mitsurugi Otada's face was almost touching his own, his eyes were purely black, a change he had known about for over 2 months. But at this moment, there was even more a kind of dark blackness jumping in those black eyes, and a black aura that seemed to be as active as tentacles appeared on his body. He had an evil smile on his face, a smile that was chilling. What's wrong? Are you going to disobey my orders? Are you kidding me? Ashuradaji couldn't help but say, you are not Mitsurugi Otada at all. At this moment, Ashuradaji had already grabbed his sword, ready to strike, but Mitsurugi remained unmoved because someone had helped him block the attack. Roji! What are you doing? Ashuradaji looked at Jinimon, who had blocked his attack, and couldn't help but roar. And Jinimon was equally angry. What about you? What are you doing? You're aiming your sword at your lord, to whom you've sworn loyalty. Are you planning treason? He's no longer the Mitsurugi Otada we know. Yes, he must be possessed by some evil spirit now, that's the only explanation for his changes during this time. Ashuradaji retorted, while the others looked at each other, not knowing what to do. And at this moment, Mitsurugi Otada burst into laughter. His laughter made Ashuradaji and Jinimon both look at him. You guys are really interesting. Jinimon. He said Jinimon's name, causing Jinimon to pause for a moment. The next moment, Mitsurugi Otada continued, you truly deserve to be my most loyal retainer. Your dedication is commendable. In the shocked eyes of everyone, Mitsurugi Otada's blade instantly struck, piercing Jinimon's body. Mitsurugi. Lord! This scene shocked everyone, especially Denjiro, who exclaimed, Lord Mitsurugi, what are you doing? But Mitsurugi just smiled calmly. Don't panic, I'm giving him new life. At this moment, people noticed that Mitsurugi Otada's blade was black, and it seemed to be wriggling, more like tentacles than a sword. And at this moment, that black power also entered Jinimon's body. Jinimon's struggling body suddenly stopped, because he felt that he wasn't dead, but instead, a kind of power was entering his body. Izu watched quietly from the side. He watched as this wave of remnants of Kaido changed inside Mitsurugi Otada's body. Chapter 195 Idolatry. The remnants of Kaido contained extremely powerful dark energy. If directly implanted into someone else's body, it would merge the dark energy with the person, causing their soul to be tainted and corrupted by darkness. However, this kind of dark energy would also merge with the person, awakening what kind of power depends on the person's aptitude. If it's the seed of Kaido, it would directly turn the person into Kaido. But the remnants of Kaido could only play a role in darkening and amplifying. That's why Toguro had been observing Mitsurugi Otada here, wanting to see what resonance Mitsurugi could have with the remnants of Kaido. And now Mitsurugi Otada had pierced Jinimon's body with a black blade. However, Jinimon didn't die, instead, something black and viscous, like porridge, kept entering Jinimon's body. A black energy emanated from Jinimon's body, and his expression became comfortable. He only felt a huge power entering his body. At the same time, black tentacles bound the other 7 people. The tentacles were too fast for them to react. By the time they noticed, the same dark power had already entered their bodies. The 8 people emitted a low groan and scream, and if someone passed by, they would probably think it was hell. Scattering the power among them is too wasteful, Toguro said coldly as he watched Mitsurugi Otada. Mitsurugi smiled, if we want to better accomplish our mission, relying on just 2 people is not enough. We need to control this country first. Toguro said indifferently, as you wish, but it's better to hurry. Many outsiders should have arrived in Wano. Mitsurugi remained silent, and then one by one, the tentacles dissipated. The first to dissipate was the one on Jinemon's body, and he was the first to regain his freedom, involuntarily looking at his hands. Faintly, there seemed to be dark energy still fluctuating, a terrifying power lurking within. He couldn't help but want to howl to the sky to vent everything he had gained. It felt too comfortable, he had never felt such a powerful force before. Mitsurugi-sama. Jinemon looked at Mitsurugi Otada, as did the others. After regaining their mobility, they all looked at Mitsurugi with worshipful expressions, immediately bowing and saying, Mitsurugi-sama has treated us so kindly, but we doubted you before. We deserve to die. It's okay. You are all my most trusted subordinates, Mitsurugi said with a slight smile. Now, follow me to where my father is. Toguro looked coldly at Mitsurugi Otada's actions. He had vaguely sensed what kind of power Mitsurugi Otada had obtained through the remnants of Kaido. Firstly, because he had been observing from the sidelines, and secondly, because the remnants of Kaido were originally owned by Source One, so he knew any changes to them. After Mitsurugi Otada transferred his power to the 8 people, theoretically, his strength would definitely decline, but the decline was very slight, far less than the power he transferred. It seemed that after he transferred his power to others, they contributed a spiritual power to Mitsurugi, which in turn restored the power Mitsurugi himself had consumed. Could it be submission? Or admiration? Source One suddenly thought of this possibility, and his face became somewhat strange. How come Mitsurugi Otada's awakened ability seemed so sinister? And to some extent, it was a bit like himself. Source One could exert a certain degree of dominance over those who gained his power, and the more people who gained his power, the better the effect of the dominance. It was a bit outrageous. But it was true that Mitsurugi Otada seemed to fit this ability perfectly. If this ability developed further, would it gradually make enemies worship him in battle? This ability was interesting. Originally, he thought that the remnants of Kaido were definitely not as effective as the seed of Kaido, but now it seemed that the difference in effect was only in terms of power level. In this special ability, the remnants of Kaido were even better. It depended on how Mitsurugi Otada would push forward the events in Wano. At least for now, just as he thought, Mitsurugi Otada had entered the room of Kojiki Sukiyaki. He opened the door and saw Kojiki Sukiyaki busily handling official affairs. Mitsurugi smiled and walked in. Mitsurugi! How dare you show your face to me? Sukiyaki saw Mitsurugi coming in and immediately said discontentedly, do you know what's happening in Wano now? So what? You are the general of Wano. You don't even have this courage. Mitsurugi casually glanced at the documents on the table and said disdainfully. You! Sukiyaki said angrily, I won't let you do these things next. Father, you're old, Mitsurugi said with a cold gaze at Sukiyaki. He said indifferently, you're too timid now. You're no longer suitable to oversee the development of Wano. You, Sukiyaki widened his eyes, looking incredulously at Mitsurugi Otada. What are you saying? Mitsurugi Otada showed a cruel smile. I'm saying, from now on, I will become the general of Wano. Chapter 196 Oden's Diary. Mitsurugi Otada, you're insane. Sukiyaki exclaimed in shock, his face pale. He shouted, Fukuro Kyuju. However, no one responded. Mitsurugi Otada chuckled, your ninja subordinate has already been taken care of by Reizo. Oh, Reizo, you should know him, right? He used to be a talented ninja among the Myujin faction, but he joined my ranks. What does that prove? Mitsurugi walked around Sukiyaki, speaking at the same time. It shows that people think I'm far more excellent than you. Similarly, my ninjas are stronger than yours. Fukuro Kyujo's death completely proves this. Mitsurugi approached Sukiyaki at this moment, showing a rather cruel smile. Now, I think you should understand what I mean. You. Sukiyaki was burning with anger. He wanted to shout to attract the attention of the guards, but at this moment, Mitsurugi had already pierced his body with his own palm. This stab did not use his own power because he thought it was not worth it to use it on an old man. He did have the ability of idol worship, but the feedback from humans was also based on the other party's strength. For someone like Sukiyaki, who wasn't particularly strong, it would be a waste to actively inject his own dark energy. If you want to blame someone, blame your weakness and blame you for trying to stop my actions, Mitsurugi said as Sukiyaki's body trembled incessantly. Mitsurugi continued speaking into his ear, and Sukiyaki's body kept trembling until he finally collapsed forward and fell down. Mitsurugi looked at his father's body lying on the ground, silent. His eyes were completely black, but at this moment, it seemed as if a trace of clarity flashed through, but it was quickly suppressed by the resentment in his heart. Himura Kenshin killed him, and he just wanted to find Himura Kenshin for revenge. What's wrong with that? Why did Kojiki Sukiyaki stop him? If he insisted on stopping him, then kill him. Yes, that's right, kill him. Mitsurugi looked at Sukiyaki's body, walked slowly to the door, and pushed it open. Jinemon and Denjiro entered. Of course, they also saw Sukiyaki's body lying down, but neither of them said anything. Inform the lords of each township. Tell them that my father has suddenly fallen seriously ill and is dying. Let them come to the capital to discuss the next steps. Mitsurugi said indifferently. Yes. Jinemon and Denjiro faithfully carried out his orders. They quickly left, and then informed others. The general's mansion was completely under their control. Next, they would send people to the lords of each township, bringing all the lords to the general's mansion. By then, Mitsurugi would become the new general, truly controlling Wano. And calling all the lords over at once, it was obvious that Mitsurugi wanted to control all of them in one fell swoop. By then, he would be the general of Wano, and the other lords would all be under his control. By then, the entire Wano would be in his grasp, and he didn't believe he couldn't find Himura Kenshin. Thinking of this, Mitsurugi couldn't help but smile. He even seemed to see Himura Kenshin's dying look. Equally noteworthy was the body of that shrine maiden. Noticed the shrine maiden, or 2 months ago. At that time, he had just recovered from his injuries and was preparing to take his retainers to find Himura Kenshin, but was stopped by Toguro. He had fought Toguro, even though he had begun to grow stronger at that time, but he was still no match for Toguro. Toguro told him something. He had witnessed his battle with Himura Kenshin from start to finish and was very sure he was killed, but after his death, someone put something in his body that allowed him to revive. Mitsurugi didn't know what it was, but he felt great, unprecedented freedom of thought, so he didn't care at all. He was only concerned about who had revived him. Toguro said that person's goal was to find the body of a shrine maiden, so Mitsurugi thought that as long as he found the body of the shrine maiden first, that person would definitely come to see him. By then, Mitsurugi would kill him. Although he revived himself, he might know the secret in his body and probably want to use him. He couldn't tolerate such a thing. Anyone who wanted to use him would die. Including Toguro. Did he think Mitsurugi didn't know Toguro's purpose? It was nothing more than wanting to use his influence in Wano to find the fragments of the Shikon Jewel. He thought Wano was a closed country, and its intelligence was not well informed, but he didn't know that Mitsurugi was particularly concerned about outsiders. After seeing Toguro, he sent someone to investigate Toguro, knowing he was a monster on the sea and his purpose had always been to find the fragments of the Shikon Jewel. But it was also good. Mitsurugi was also interested in the Shikon Jewel fragments. By then, he would kill Toguro, then seize the Shikon Jewel fragments from him. Thinking of this, Mitsurugi couldn't help but smile. Anyone who knew his secret had to die, so Himura Kenshin had to die, that mysterious person had to die, and Toguro had to die too. Now, he was much stronger than before. He could feel himself getting stronger, always getting stronger. The feeling was so comfortable, seeing the people around him worshipping him like dogs made him feel even more refreshed. Before, he was not Toguro's opponent, but at that time, the gap was already very small, and now he needed to absorb more people's belief in him, then make himself stronger, strong enough to kill that mysterious person and Toguro. But now, let's make use of Toguro first. Soon, the entire Wano would fall into his control, and by then, he would be their master. Mitsurugi suddenly felt a trace of anxiety. Wasn't he so great? Shouldn't he leave something behind? He Would write a diary. He suddenly had this idea. He wanted to write a completely new diary, recording his rebirth. He felt that he had been divided into two completely different stages. One was before he was killed by Kenshin, when he was too stupid, and he couldn't record anything at that time. What he wanted to record was the miraculous experience after he died and was resurrected. He wanted to record everything and then pass this diary down forever. Thinking of it, Mitsurugi immediately found a notebook and began to write. I experienced the death of the body and the rebirth of the soul. After returning from the celestial realm, I fell into contemplation about the world and life. I think. Chapter 197 Siege. Kojiki Sukiyaki is seriously ill. And had already arrived at the flower capital, and she heard the news spreading among the guards on the street, her brows furrowing instantly. How could a king of a country be seriously ill and still have such a big fuss about it? Something was off, very off. However, there were very few people on the streets. It seemed that the flower capital was also greatly affected. Although it was impossible for Himura Kenshin to hide within the flower capital, the streets were no different from other cities. There were hardly any people around. Only groups of martial artists patrolling out of the city were swiftly running, very different from when she first arrived here. Fortunately, she was now dressed in a kimono, wrapped around her waist with fabric and wearing wooden clogs under her feet, full of Wano style. The only conspicuous thing was her blue hair. And it was precisely because of this blue hair that she was surrounded by a group of samurai. Do you have something to do with you all? And looked at the several samurai surrounding her with a calm expression and said indifferently, I don't think I've done anything wrong, have I? You don't seem to have done anything wrong, but... More and more samurai surrounded her, and she frowned. Suddenly, she felt a strong force pressing on her, that was... Aura. Toguro? She thought of Toguro, whom she had encountered before entering the city. Could he have mixed with the Kojiki family? If that was the case, then she was indeed exposed. While she was thinking quickly, she heard the samurai continue to speak. You're not from Wano, are you? Coming from Wano or coming to Wano from outside, both are capital offenses. They showed cruel smiles on their faces because An was a great beauty, and such enemies were their favorites. And looked at their expressions, a hint of disgust appearing on her face. Discovered, huh? That's troublesome. An's Kanbunshoku haki released, and she instantly captured Toguro's position. Toguro was nearby, seemingly waiting for her. As those samurai approached her, her eyes turned cold. She released an extremely powerful aura from her observation haki, spreading it out. Instantly, all the samurai approaching her fell down. It was just a blink of an eye, and there were only a pile of rubbish left in front of An. She kicked away the samurai blocking her path, then moved forward slowly. She knew that this was the most dangerous moment. Toguro had already discovered her, and he was very likely to have joined forces with the flower capital's official forces, which meant her situation was very dangerous now. Although those samurai were no match for her, there were definitely unknown experts in Wano. And now, those people were rapidly approaching. She could sense it, from her senses, she could feel the presence of different strong individuals from 8 directions. Well, although she couldn't compare to Toguro in terms of power, in terms of speed. And didn't think she was inferior to the other party. An's strongest was her observation haki. She had already seen the future, so she almost perfectly avoided their blockade. Even though those samurai were close, she still avoided the blades with extremely agile movements and continued forward after passing by the figures. Her observation haki had already analyzed the weaknesses of those people, so they couldn't delay her, not even for a second. An's mouth curled up. This was her first full-scale battle since she left Roger's body. It felt good. Since you're here, why leave? However, just as she was about to leave quickly, another man's voice appeared in front of her again. He held 2 knives in his hands, and the knives were black, very much like the Black Blade, but with some differences. Otadan Nitoryu, Tujan Shiratani. It was Mitsurugi. An's pupils contracted, and at this moment, her observation haki sensed an incredible evil power from Mitsurugi, which directly confirmed his identity as a devil. It was Mitsurugi. Chapter 198 Escape. Previously, when Hyogo told her about the events, she believed that both Himura Kenshin and Mitsurugi were suspects of being demons. And now, Mitsuragai's appearance, and the blatant release of his evil aura, directly confirmed his identity to An. Yes, he was the demon and had been searching for all along, or rather, a demon associated with the Demon Lord. Just like the group of demon worshippers in Jaltsburg, the Demon Lord's appearance required a lot of preparation. However, while the previous demon worshippers were lower-tier individuals, this time, the demon worshippers were the Kojiki clan of Wano. Although she knew this information, she had lost contact with Roger now and couldn't report or transmit this information to Rajan. She gritted her teeth, and her short sword in hand instantly gathered a large amount of haki. Conqueror's haki and armament haki intertwined on the blade, and suddenly collided with Mitsuragai's twin blades. Boom! In an instant, a massive haki overflowed, and the sky above split open. Mitsuragai also had Conqueror's haki? And was surprised. She didn't expect someone with Conqueror's haki to become a demon's slave. The clouds were directly split apart by the massive haki, revealing the towering sky, and the sun shone directly into the city without obstruction from the clouds. During the collision, the samurai behind An had already arrived, and deliberately retreated with the help of Mitsuragai's power. In her retreat, she turned around and stabbed the Azura child behind her in the chest with her blade, using this resistance to twist her body and retreat to the other side. But there were pursuers here as well, and she could only continue to evade. But in the end, she couldn't dodge it. During the fifth change of position, Mitsuragai's blade struck her abdomen. Splurt! Blood continuously flowed out, and An even felt as if there was a black aura at her wound, as if it wanted to drill into her body. She was suddenly startled, and her armament haki instantly hardened that area. However, just with this slight distraction, Toguro appeared behind her. With a punch, it was like the roar of heaven and earth, and a massive force burst out. An couldn't dodge it. She could only grip her short sword tightly and gather her strength to strike back at Toguro's fist. Boom! In the collision of strength, she was at a disadvantage, especially since her strike was too rushed. She was directly blasted hundreds of meters away by Toguro's punch, crashing directly into a building and causing it to collapse. The building collapsed instantly, hitting An. As an alternative, why don't you join us and cooperate with us? Mitsuragai approached calmly. An was no longer much of a threat to them. We in Wano will eventually replace the world government as the new rulers of this world. By then, you will still be an admiral of the navy, as long as you become my loyal subordinate. He showed an evil smile and said to An. Indeed, they were lacking high-end combat power. Even if the Kamawari clan received his enhancement, they could only act as middle-tier combatants. After he learned that the world government had the Navy, the Black Order, and the Pushing Beasts, three organizations with powerful combat forces, he decided to build his own army. In his army, the commander must also be a combatant of admiral level like the Navy. An lay in the ruins. Although Toguro's punch hurt her, it didn't directly render her powerless. She was now thinking about what to do next, knowing that a direct confrontation was impossible. She couldn't be the opponent of so many people, especially since Toguro and Mitsuragai were both very strong. Running was also difficult because the other party had already blocked all her directions. This is really troublesome. An had a headache. She lifted the bricks pressing on her body and stood up from the ruins. Looking at the 10 people surrounding her, she sighed lightly. It seems that I'm going to die here this time. If I join you, can I still survive? Of course, Mitsuragai smiled. I just need you to be my spy in the navy. Oh? How are you going to do it? An felt puzzled. She was curious about how Mitsuragai would ensure that she wouldn't betray him. The answer was revealed in the next second. A tentacle formed from black energy emerged from Mitsuragai's body. That tentacle seemed to contain extremely strong dark energy. An frowned. She felt that the power was similar to the energy residue Mitsuragai had left on her wound before. That energy seemed to want to penetrate her body at first. Could it be that Mitsuragai had the ability to control others? She looked at the 8 people standing around Mitsuragai and Toguro. They were silent, but at this moment, they emitted a faint purple light similar to that tentacle. They were controlled by Mitsuragai? And Mitsuragai wanted to continue controlling her? An subconsciously took a step back, and the tentacle was quickly approaching. If she resisted, it would inevitably arouse Mitsuragai and Toguro's killing intent, but if she didn't resist, she would be controlled by Mitsuragai. And at this moment, her extraordinary observation Haki sensed words coming from a distance. Please retreat in this direction, we will help you. And raised her eyebrows. She didn't have much time to think now. She directly cut off the tentacle that was about to bind her and quickly ran towards the direction where the voice came from. Don't think about running away. In that direction, Zoro was hidden. He saw Anne's movement and had already swung his sword. His attack couldn't stop Anne, but as long as he could delay her for a moment, it would be enough. I knew Admiral wouldn't give up so easily. Behind her came Mitsuragai's voice again. And dodged Zoro's slash, simultaneously twisting her body to avoid Mitsuragai's blade. She had already seen the future. Even in the encirclement of so many people, as long as she briefly evaded, there would be no problem. She dodged the two most dangerous strikes, but Toguro had already rushed over. And kept advancing, trying to distance herself from Toguro. However, Toguro's physical strength was higher than hers, and while Anne surpassed Toguro in agility, it was now just a simple race. She couldn't outrun Toguro. Anne suddenly turned around and swung her sword, intending to force Toguro back. However, Toguro relied on his body to take her blow head on and, at the same time, heavily punched her abdomen. The punch directly struck Anne's abdomen, and Anne spat out a mouthful of blood. With a bang, she flew far away. Chapter 199 Betrayal. Anne only felt that her internal organs were shifting, and she directly spat out a mouthful of blood, being blasted further away by the vibrations in her body. Boom! The tremendous force caused her to destroy the streets along the way, but it also allowed her to quickly distance herself from Toguro and the others. Of course, this didn't matter to them. Because Anne was already seriously injured, even if she temporarily distanced herself from them, there was nothing to worry about. Injured as she was, Anne couldn't escape their grasp. Mitsuragai was already rapidly approaching with Toguro and his subordinates. The road ahead had become a ruin, and the dust obstructed their vision. Mitsuragai made a cruel smile. Since Anne was unwilling to become his subordinate, then let it be slow. As long as she stayed with him for long enough, sooner or later, she would be influenced by his power, and then Anne would naturally become his subordinate. He thought so in his heart and led his men step by step. However, when he arrived there, his face suddenly turned pale. Because there was no trace of Anne in that huge pit. Where is Anne? He suppressed his inner anger and said coldly to Toguro and his subordinates. Toguro also rushed over at this time. He looked at the pit created by his power here, and frowned. Someone rescued her. Didn't you evacuate everyone else? Mitsuragai immediately roared, yes. There shouldn't be anyone here who can help that woman. That's why I said, why did she disappear? Toguro said in a deep voice, I don't know, but I suggest sealing off the flower capital. I don't think they can escape within such a short time. Mitsuragai looked at Toguro with his black eyes, then at his 8 retainers. At this moment, they were all on thin ice, trembling with fear. Only one person had a hint of other emotions beyond fear. Kanjuro. Mitsuragai immediately walked over, almost face to face with Kanjuro. Mitsuragai's face was almost ferocious, and his anger was clearly visible in the black child's eyes. He gritted his teeth and roared at Kanjuro, what did you do? Did you betray me? From Kanjuro's emotions, he felt not only fear and terror but also a lot of regret and remorse, which was different from others. So he directly grabbed Kanjuro's collar and lifted him up. The others widened their eyes when they heard Mitsuragai's words. They looked at Kanjuro, who was lifted up by Mitsuragai, and angrily said, Kanjuro, did you betray Lord Mitsuragai? Mitsuragai. Lord. Kanjuro smiled bitterly at this moment. As expected, I can't hide it from you. I originally wanted to say that this was the last time I helped them. From now on, I am a true retainer of the Kojiki clan. But I am indeed deeply sinful. You, kill me. He seemed to have already made up his mind to die, and Mitsuragai couldn't believe that Kanjuro would really betray him. He had already infected Kanjuro with his ability. Even if it was someone unrelated to him who was infected by him, they would become his loyal subordinates, unless they had deep hatred against him. Otherwise, they couldn't betray him again. But what was going on with Kanjuro? Who are you? Who are they? Mitsuragai roared, what kind of person can make you betray me? Forgive me, Lord Mitsuragai. Kanjuro said softly, "My surname is Kurozumai." Mitsuragai's eyes narrowed, and he immediately threw Kanjuro away. Kanjuro, like trash, was thrown to the side. He didn't stand up, as if he had lost the will to live. And the surrounding companions looked at him at this moment as if they were looking at trash, but Mitsuragai didn't kill him. Kurozumai, how could he not know this surname? In the era before his father was born, Kurozumai was also a daimyo of Wano, but he was exterminated along with his whole family because of rebellion. In this case, it was reasonable for the Kurozumai clan to hate him. But he didn't expect that there were still remnants of the Kurozumai clan, and they even gathered together. Kanjuro even infiltrated his subordinates, and Mitsuragai personally couldn't believe that Kanjuro would really betray him. He clearly infected Kanjuro with his power. Even if it was someone unrelated to him who was infected by him, they would become his loyal subordinates. Unless they had deep hatred against him, they couldn't betray him again. But what was going on with Kanjuro? "You must deal with this matter," Mitsuragai said coldly, "take him back and interrogate him well." However, his mood wasn't that bad. Although he didn't catch and missed a high-ranking officer, he caught the spy beside him, and also learned about a resistance force, which could be considered as making up for the loss of an. He believed that under his ability, Kanjuro of the Kurozumai clan would soon be completely subdued. After all, he had stopped using his dark power on them because he trusted these 8 people. Now it seemed that he still needed to let them radiate in his dark power. In this way, everything would be foolproof. And as long as he modified it for a while, even if Kanjuro was from the Kurozumai clan, he would be completely loyal to him. By then, he would wipe out the remnants of the so-called Kurozumai clan, and he would even let Kanjuro do it personally. Thinking of this, his mood eased a bit, and then he prepared to search the whole city. As long as An and the people of the Kurozumai clan didn't escape from this city, they would definitely not escape from his palm. An was hit by my punch. It will take at least a week for her to recover. Toguro said coldly, but since the people of the Kurozumai clan were able to rescue her in such a short time, it proves that there are capable people among them. Their relaxation time was after An was hit by Toguro's punch and flew out. At that time, they thought that An had lost her ability to resist, and with the dust produced by her fall, they lost track of her for a while. It was during that time that they lost track of An. The Kurozumai clan. Or rather, among the allies they found, there were indeed capable people. Well, then I have to trouble you to do this. Mitsuragai patted Toguro on the shoulder. The daimyos of the other towns are about to arrive. Our plan is only missing this last step. We can't afford any mistakes. Toguro didn't speak, just walked towards the broken street and further ahead. I have to continue to improve my own strength. Watching Toguro walk away, Mitsuragai's face sank again. Chapter 200 The Black Carbon Clan. Indeed, the emerging resistance forces are increasing, and Mitsuragai needs stronger power. The master and apprentice of Himura Kenshin, the mysterious person who saved himself from death, more and more outsiders, and the remnants of the Kurozumai clan who have been lurking for decades, all of these are his enemies. So he needs stronger power to deal with them. That dark energy is already difficult to make him stronger. Although he can perceive that there are still some parts that have not been absorbed, it is no longer as easy to absorb as it was at the beginning. He needs faith. Yes, something similar. He needs to make others admire or even worship him, to obtain that kind of spiritual imprint from them, so that he can stimulate the dark power in his body more. However, how to make people worship him? Rule with benevolence? That's too troublesome, and he doesn't want to do that kind of thing at all. It would be nice if there were simpler and more brutal methods. If people could see my words and deeds, they would surely be fascinated by my greatness. Mitsuragai suddenly had an idea. He had been writing a diary before, and now he decided to infuse his dark power into it, turning his diary into a carrier of idol worship power. As long as people read his diary, they would gradually worship him. When he became a general, he would spread this diary to the crowd, letting them watch one by one. Although it's a bit troublesome, it's much simpler than infecting them one by one personally. He decided to do it, and he returned to the general's mansion to prepare to modify his diary. On the other side, the seriously injured An was indeed rescued by someone. However, she was not rescued by the people of the Kurozumai clan, and they didn't have that ability. At present, there are only 4 people in the Kurozumai clan. The first is Kurozumai Suzume, she is a user of the Mimicry Devil Fruit ability. There is also Kurozumai Jomaru, he is a user of the Barrier Devil Fruit ability. Both of these people lean toward support. The remaining one is Kurozumai Orikai, this person is considered the Iron FW, and the last one is Kurozumai Kanjuro, but he will soon become a servant of the Mitsurugi family. These 4 people did not have the ability to taken away in that time, even with the powerful external aid brought by Kaido, who was brought by Kurozumai Suzume. However, Anne was still very relieved because she heard someone calling her in that direction. This is the application of advanced observation haki, similar to what Fujitora can do. Like Fujitora, she can read the hearts of others. Among those voices, there was a person who revealed his identity, and after Anne saw the person at the last moment, she fell asleep very relieved. Because that person is her colleague. It's Raiden. Although she didn't see his face clearly, the blue iconic mask was indeed a symbol of Raiden, and there were lightning bolts emanating from his body. So, it could only be the Raiden of the Black Cult. Only Raiden's speed could taken away in that instant without being noticed by Mitsurugi. Representing their respective departments, they came to Wano, but they had only contacted each other through Den Den Mushi before. This was the first time they had met. And this first meeting happened in this kind of situation, which was unexpected by anyone. Raiden quickly took into a hidden basement. This place was not far from where she fell down. In the basement were members of the Kurozumai clan. Old Lady Kurozumai Suzume, Old Man Kurozumai Jomaru, and the short Kurozumai Orikai, these 3 people were there. Mitsurugi is becoming more and more crazy. They actually attacked a general of the world government. Seeing an unconscious, Kurozumai Suzume said angrily. Of course, at least 99% of this anger should be fake. We have confirmed that the Mitsurugi family is indeed demonic, and our world government will naturally oppose demons. Raiden placed Anne on the bed that had been prepared long ago and said to the 3 members of the Kurozumai clan. As long as your Kurozumai clan cooperates well, when the time comes, Wano will be ruled by you, and you will be the new generals of Wano. His words made the 3 of them happy. Kurozumai Suzume immediately said, with your words, we can rest assured. When the time comes, Wano can join the world government, becoming an indestructible barrier for the world government. Raiden nodded, then said, the most urgent task now is to relocate. Your spy should have been discovered. When he exposes our whereabouts, we will face their crazy retaliation. You can rest assured. Kurozumai Orikai said somewhat flatteringly, Kanjuro will never betray us, because this is his way of survival. No, I have noticed that Mitsurugi's demonic power seems to be able to bewitch people's hearts, so the so-called personality and way of survival are unreliable. Raiden shook his head. His words surprised Kurozumai Orikai. Orikai did not expect Mitsurugi to still have this ability. No wonder Kanjuro said it was the last time when he passed on the message to him before. He trembled all over, as if he would be caught and executed the next moment. Lord Raiden is right. We do need to relocate ourselves. Kurozumai Suzume said calmly. She smiled and said, our clan has been preparing for this moment for decades. How can we be easily discovered? Let them block Flower Capital. We can leave this city through the underground passage. By then, let them run around in the city. Kurozumai Suzume walked to a position and seemed to press something, and suddenly a door appeared in this dark basement. Raiden nodded, took a look at Anne lying on the bed, and said slowly, just wait for a while, and when Anne wakes up, we will leave. Kurozumai Orikai was somewhat excited at this moment. We have already discovered the true face of the Mitsurugi family. As long as it is exposed, it should be easy to take down the Mitsurugi family under our leadership. Just a moment ago, he was trembling with fear, and now he was daydreaming. Kurozumai Orikai showed human cowardice and greed to the fullest. After more than 2 hours, Anne finally woke up slowly, but she could only move a little at first. To recover from her injuries, as Toguro had judged before, it would take at least a week. But it's okay to move a little. The 5 of them hurriedly walked towards the narrow passage, ready to leave Flower Capital. During the action, Anne also heard from Raiden about what happened here. It's also thanks to Wano's proficiency in Busashoku Haki but ordinary in Kanbunshoku Haki. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so easy to take you away. Anne nodded. She whispered to Raiden beside her, but, How did you end up with the people of the Kurozumai clan?